Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Adam Green here with No More News. Thank you for joining me today, Friday, February 28th, 2025. Got a huge guest and a huge show today. Some breaking news. We're going to be covering the Ukraine-Zelenskyy meeting in the Oval Office that turned into a shouting match with Trump and J.D. Vance. We're going to talk about the Epstein disclosure that went on yesterday with all the Zionist MAGA grifters. And joining me back on the show for the first time in a long time, he was actually one of my first guests I ever had on No More News. I think we last did a stream in 2018, but he is a legend. He's epic. It's going to be a great talk. Thank you for coming back on the show, Jeremy Rothe-Kushel. What's up, dude?
What's up, Adam? Thanks for having me back. I appreciate it.
Of course, yeah. We've been talking about doing this again soon.
What's going on with my beard? It's all sparkly.
That's because you're on the iPhone, like you said,
Okay.
Probably.
All right, I'll figure it out.
Yeah,
Sorry.
you're glitching out. That your beard is matrixing out. Yeah, but so thanks for coming on. We've been talking about doing this for a while. Given Trump getting back into power and everything unfolding, you focus a lot with your show, The Antidotes. You've been in the truth movement for a long time, and you covering Trump and the Zionists and the Israeli tech and the Russia connections. What's front and center in your mind right now before we get into this Ukraine news?
That's one of them in terms of the multipolarity that's being pushed right now in relationship to a deeper understanding of what I might call deep geopolitics and understanding the relationship of the Soviet Union with Israel over a long period of time since Israel was created, and now how that's been translated into the Russia-Israel relationship and Putin and Netanyahu specifically.
So you said multipolarity. A lot of some people might not know what you mean by that. Can you expand on what you meant?
Yeah. So people will remember that after the Cold War and some people might say the alleged fall of the Soviet Union, you had this moment where the neoconservatives called for basically taking advantage of what they called the unipolar moment. You remember some of the neocons would say, if the United States has this great military, why don't we use it? We should put it into use. Boom goes 9/11, and you have Netanyahu celebrating it as a very good thing for the Israel-U.S. relationship in the pages of the New York Times on September 12, 2001. You have Ehud Barak live on BBC television saying this will be the launch of a long war on terror with the U.S. leading the way. By the way, he also says the U.S. with allies and Russia also is what Ehud Barak says.
I just saw a clip of Dugin years ago saying that 9/11 is when Russia turned around and started to grow or something like that.
Exactly.
Did you see that?
Actually, yes. Actually, I think I found that clip, and then
you shared it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I gave it to Joseph Davis, who then knew exactly what it meant. And actually, it was that clip that really warned me further about the danger of the Duginist New Horizons conference, which I was actually then ultimately invited to go to.
That was the one in Iran?
Yes, and that year, I think it was 2019 when I was invited, and it was going to happen in early 2020, I think, just as things were heating up. And so it was during the first Trump administration, and they had basically this, I think, a dual citizen, American-Israeli woman, Sigan Mandelkar or something like that, in charge of the Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Asset Control. And so that was the year where people who went actually got knocks on the door from the FBI. And I had already seen this clip from Dugin, who was featured at this conference. It's usually in Iran. That year, I believe they were going to host it in Lebanon. and Dugin seems to be the featured speaker at that conference, along with all these other American dissidents.
Corsi and E. Michael Jones, right? That's the one that they were at.
Yes, and I'm not sure the Corsi.
Oh wait, did I say Corsi? I meant not Corsi. It was. I'm forgetting.
Phil Giraldi.
Phil Giraldi. That's who I meant.
Yes.
It ends with
Phil
an
Giraldi.
I. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Michael Maloof, who was this very little known neocon, and Greg McCarran from The Antidote. He found that Maloof was actually identified as this key neoconservative who worked in the Office of Special Plans, which was this very Zionist cell that they attached to the Pentagon after 9/11 for the run-up of the Iraq War.
Wasn't that the one that was like had a sister group in Israel? The Special Plans had like a. Okay.
Exactly.
Hey, look who's here. Good to see you. Expose the Enemy, John Swin. Saw him pop back up on Twitter, and now he's in the comments on Odysee, man. What's up? Expose the Enemy. Good to see you here.
We have the Atlanticist Alliance. Yeah.
The Anglo.
Yeah. The Anglo-American Alliance. So this, I noticed that this clip of Dugin that I caught from one of the live streams from the New Horizons conference was Dugin as this featured speaker amidst all these other people, like this Michael Maloof guy who goes from the neoconservative Office of Special Plans. He was identified in some articles as the person who was one of the main conduits to Judith Miller at the New York Times for pushing the disinformation about the intelligence for the Iraq War, and then ends up on Russia Today. This is another Michael Maloof, which
wrong one.
He's up. If you go to the top defense
there, Pentagon.
Right there.
Yeah, sorry.
That's
that looks more like it. RT. Yeah,
exactly. So you begin to see the milieu, and then I see Dugin saying this thing that you just mentioned, that he's like 9/11 was not only the beginning of the rise of the multipolar world order, but also the beginning of the reverse of the decline of Russia as this great world power and part of the multipolar world order. And so the basic distinction is that it's being proposed that there is a multipolar world order that in many ways is just a replication of the Cold War in many ways, but just bringing in China.
Isn't this just kind of code? Anytime I describe multipolar, people that are talking, advocating for a multipolar world, like, don't we already basically live in a multipolar world? And that's just code for like decreasing the power of the West in America?
That's basically what they claim. Like, the people can go find this. It's not even a debate. It's just a discussion between Alexander Dugin, and John Mearsheimer, who's the most notorious American realist, geopolitical analyst, very famous for his article and then book, The Israel Lobby, with Stephen Walt, which is actually a crucial book. But in the last decade, he really seems to have been really taken over in many ways by these multipolar world order interests. He is very touchy about where some money comes from when he goes and visits with Viktor Orban in Hungary, which is a key axis between Russia and Israel, actually. And you'll find that the Russian deep state helped propel him into power and then turn him from Europe back to Russia. And at the same time, you have these major Netanyahu figures who are helping him gain his power there under the whole George Soros is the boogeyman rhetoric. And
Birnbaum and Finkelstein.
Exactly. That entire network, Arthur Finkelstein, George Birnbaum. Birnbaum worked directly under Netanyahu in Israel, and they then work on this global information warfare.
Just like Lewandowski worked for Trump in 2016 and then went and worked for Netanyahu.
Oh, that's interesting. So that's a reverse. There's another guy called John McLaughlin, who's actually one of the Arthur Finkelstein GOP operatives, who goes the other way. He goes straight out of working for Netanyahu into working for the first Trump campaign. So that was one thing that Greg and I analyzed early on in the first Trump years, was that there was this Arthur Finkelstein network behind all of these guys. And Finkelstein actually had helped put Netanyahu in power back in 1996. So
And Chabad, basically him and Chabad.
Yes. And so and that's actually one thing that I think that a while ago I talked about the idea of a Jewish deep state and a deep Jewish state. Okay. So meaning that the Jewish deep state is something like Chabad, worldwide power, in that case, oriented towards religious networks. Of course, we know this whole background with the rise of Chabad in Russia. And people talk about how, a lot of the multipolar black Russian propaganda tries to say, especially for like the people questioning Jewish power or people talking about the Jewish problem and all of that, there's been a lot of marketing towards those networks of this totally false idea that Putin kicked out all of the Jewish oligarchs. What actually happened was that he rolled Berezovsky, who was the main Jewish oligarch who helped him bring Putin to power, and then Putin, who comes out of what's known as the Siloviki, this very strong KGB network. And you'll find that all of the people with actual government power surrounding Putin are not Jewish oligarchs. They're KGB officers at a very high level. And so what you really see is that Putin kicks out the sort of George Soros-y. He imprisons some of them. He kicks out some of them. And many of them actually, like people like, I think one of them's name is Guzinski, they were actually the ones who were publicly against the escalation of the Second Chechen War. And so then Putin then disciplines those. He brings Chabad, these way more militant Jewish supremacist oligarchs, into power, and then facilitates their entire takeover of the entirety of like the Russian Jewish community. And so they basically, you have two different kinds of mob rolling operations at the same time. You have Putin rolling some of the oligarchs that brought him into power, the Jewish oligarchs, and then you also then have the actual Jewish oligarchs being rolled by the Chabad network, which now, as with that infamous clip that you helped popularize, shows that like Chabad is now up 90-something% of Jewish life in Russia. And so that sort of is an indicator of what's actually going on in relationship to the Putin-Netanyahu network, that you have Arthur Finkelstein, this key American GOP operative who helps bring Orban into power, help bring Netanyahu into power, helps bring Trump into power, in line with this Chabadi network that is in support of and a major power player, both in terms of Netanyahu's government and Putin's government.
So almost everybody besides like the hardcore Zionist shills online these days know about Israeli influence in America and with Trump cabinet and MAGA, but they're still under the impression that any talk of Russian collusion is just like Democrat Rachel Maddow disinfo. And I know you focused a lot on Russia, read a lot of books about Russian mafia and how it intertwines with Israel and Zionism. So before we start the Ukraine clips of Zelensky's meeting, could you just give us like a quick summary of the background of where you're coming from with the Trump, Russia, Israel? I know you already touched on it a little bit, but just kind of, encapsulate it for us so people understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, and I think this is structurally important to understand the narrative and information warfare dynamics, and especially weaponized dialectics. Anytime you're dealing with like the background, especially of like, the Soviet Union, you're talking about materialism and dialectics. And the Soviet Union had a special piece of the KGB dedicated to long-term strategic deception. Okay, so the whole narrative around Trump being brought to power is this idea of Israel is our greatest so-called ally, right? And we need them in the Middle East. They're a friend. And Russia is this rising nemesis, especially in the post, post 9/11 order, where there's growing tension with Russia. So in many ways, the actual Russian influence, and it was massive, and there's a deep background with Trump and Russia going back into the Soviet Union, including, you would just point out, like the background of his first wife, Ivana Trump. There were questions about the then Czech intelligence connections underneath the Soviet Union and KGB umbrella of her family. And then you see Trump going to Russia, Soviet Union in the 80s.
I saw the meme or the graphic that you posted the other day saying quotes from Don Jr. talking about how they have all this business dealings with Russia, and then Trump claiming that he has no business with Russia once he was became a political candidate and president. So
exactly.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that shows not only the high-level deception that Donald Trump should be known for at this point, no collusion, and then no Russia, no Trump Russia, and all of that. But it also shows that the nature of the background of Trump being cultivated as an asset of the Russian deep state. And so this is a very important piece to understand, to see how Trump was facilitated directly by the Russian deep state. Because what happened with the rise of Trump is you then also have the Bannon types who actually occupy, I would say, Zionist occupation, really, of the term deep state to mean something like the administrative state that we're actually now seeing being attacked by Doge and Elon Musk. Whereas the actual definition, the academic definition of the deep state, comes out of scholars like Peter Dale Scott, where the deep state is defined as, on the top of it, you have the national security apparatus, mainly the covert arms of the security services, and then the underside of the deep state is the organized crime, mob activity, the black economy, where those are usually then used as assets, sometimes with legitimate national security interests and sometimes highly illegitimately. Okay, and so you can see that Trump was not only cultivated by the overt arm of the Russian deep state when he was brought to Moscow into one of the KGB cultivation programs. He comes back after his trip in the late 80s to actually, he just sort of feigns a run for president at that point. He starts articulating the problem with NATO and really takes out an op-ed to push Russian geopolitical interests into the American newspapers. And the way that Trump is then more deeply cultivated from then on, and actually it was already happening in the 80s in terms of real estate, is via this move of dozens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars of Russian deep state money, the underside of Russian deep state money in terms of Russian oligarchs, Russian organized crime, start flooding into his properties, not only in Manhattan, but around the world. And people, if they're interested in that background, they should actually go look up Trump Toronto, which shows the most direct confluence of the relationship of the Russian deep state to the Israeli deep state. And that's another deeper story, that especially after the so-called fall of the Soviet Union, there was a massive push of Russian oligarchs, most of them Jewish, not all of them. Actually, some of them seem to have been sort of Jew-washed into Israel via things like contributing a bunch of money to the political powers and parties such as the Likud party. And there's a big background that, yeah. No. That sounds very
Shoot, I'm on mute. I'm on mute for people. I coughed earlier. I said, did you see the clip of the Rebbe saying having foreknowledge about the fall of the Soviet Union? So
no.
Can you answer? Yeah.
I haven't seen that, but it sounds very intriguing to me.
All right. I didn't find it on my first search, so I'll have to look for it again. But I'm sure. What do you think about how Putin feels about today's incident in the Oval Office?
He loves it. I mean, you can go look at the Russian media and the way that they're talking about the Trump alleged victory in the election, and they are ecstatic. And, you know, I've found Greg and I were reporting on this post-election interview between Dimitri Simes and Dugin. And Dimitri Simes is this crucial character. He actually got indicted in the last year in the United States for breaking sanctions with Russia. I think he lives in Russia now. He has a state media contract there, and he was part of what was known as the CNI. I think it's the Center for National Interests, which is the confluence of the geopolitical interests in the American sphere behind Trump. The Mayflower Hotel scene, which was backed by the CNI, is the first announcement of a shift, especially on Russian foreign policy by the Trump years, basically. And Simes and Dugin, when they're discussing that the incoming Trump administration, they're celebrating Tulsi Gabbard a whole bunch, says that that's one of the smartest guys. He calls him a guy, I think. He calls Tulsi Gabbard a guy, Dugin does. So, and then all over Russian media, they're just celebrating all of this. And so this now what we're seeing today happen between Trump and J.D. Vance. By the way, they sort of teamed up on Zelenskyy.
I've never seen any. There's never been anything like this. The president berating another world leader in the Oval Office. No, I don't even think close to something like this.
No, nothing like this.
You know, I'll be impressed. You know, come talk to me. Would Trump ever talk to Putin like this? The aggressor in the war, would he ever talk to Putin like this? Or would he ever talk to Netanyahu like this? Saying, hey, we're funding you and you better end this war and do what I say. He would never do that.
Hand over Gaza to us right now. We're going to make Trump Gaza and all of that. No, he would not do that. Like, maybe he would have Steve Witkoff allegedly be tough on Netanyahu and call him from Shabbat to meet with him or something like that.
That was the claim they were going with. Yeah.
And who knows about that? I'm distrustful of that. But you'd never. I mean, that's what people notice. If you look at like the whole layers of open source intelligence, you look at things like that, like physical. Like, what is the physical evidence? What is the body language? You know, Trump sort of seating Netanyahu. Trump is sort of acting as a butler to Netanyahu. And then when you see Trump go meet Putin for the first time in his first administration. Helsinki, I think, you see him come out of the room. And by the way, they did not allow serious oath sworn Americans into that room for these private discussions between Trump and Putin. But when Trump and Putin emerge from the room, Trump looks like a slave. He's all hunched over, and Putin is beaming with his back and neck all, up and erect and everything like that. And so you can see that this is not just a matter of Trump sort of servicing his own interests. He is servicing his own interests, but his own interests are related to his deeper capture and very likely compromise by Putin and the Russian deep state.
Putin's basically the dictator of Russia, the KGB turned dictator of Russia. He's got these sham elections. He's been in power basically since 9/11 around then. Same situation with Netanyahu, huge corruption trials, and he's been in power for longer than any prime minister ever. But Trump would never dare call either one of them a dictator, but he called Zelenskyy a dictator last week. And then when it was asked, he says, would you call Putin a dictator? And he goes, oh, I don't just throw that around. And then he pretended like he didn't call Zelenskyy a dictator.
He's like, did I really do that?
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, he did, and you're right. Like he would never do that to Putin, even though the case is that Zelensky is actually he's following the Ukrainian constitution, that they are in the middle of an invasion and a war, and if we were actually in a land invasion by the Russians, let's say they came through Alaska or something like that, there would, even in the Civil War, there were certain aspects of the Constitution that were suspended that may have not been legitimate, but it's in the Ukrainian, rule of law that you're not going to be forced to hold elections while you're being invaded, and so it's pretty clear that is a Putin interest that Trump is servicing. They want to replace Ukrainian leadership, and they want to get back to what very likely they do their information warfare, their potential election fraud, and they would try to deploy their own puppet into that position. Now, it does look like of all the politicians, Zelensky still is potentially the most popular. He's not the most popular of any candidate. It would actually be a Ukrainian general. And in that case, if they actually were to have free elections, Putin might be even in more trouble. But I think that they're trying to actually do a swap for a Putin puppet in Ukraine. And that's what it looks like Trump is servicing right now.
Mm-hmm. After they get all the minerals and the natural resources that they're trying to work out. I got a big super chat in from Iron Pilled. Appreciate you again, Iron Pilled. He says, I'll start the donos to keep the family happy. I know, we got to keep Mrs. No More News happy, guys. She always asks me. Hope the steak was good, and keep up the shows. Yeah, show every day this week. And we did have another steak on Iron Pilled last night. My daughter loves it. My daughter, literally, I'll cut up the steak. It was a New York strip, and she only eats off the fat off one of the ends.
That's sort of like the opposite of our son. Yeah. My wife, she loves the fatty pieces, but our son William, he loves like the very proteiny pieces.
Yeah.
But everyone loves steak too in this household.
Yep. So Trump starts by basically taking a jab that he's not wearing a suit. Listen to this. Oh, actually, you know what? I found the should we play the fall of the Soviet Union thing?
Sure.
Real quick. I had that.
Framed this, actually, yeah.
3 weeks after, in April of 1985, 3 weeks after Gorbachev was named the premier.
Oh, that's right. Hold on. Sorry.
And this is the same guy who exposes that Chabad has taken over all of Russian Jewish life.
Exactly.
In April of 1985, 3 weeks after Gorbachev is named the premier of Russia, Professor Herman Broniver, who some of you may know, who was a very well-known Russian professor, he was paid a very high ransom to get out of Russia, the Rebbe calls him in, he wants to speak to him. And this is what he tells him. He says to him, the gates of Russia are going to come down soon. The Jews of Russia are going to be released. I don't want you to call the media. I want you to call the Jews in Russia, your contacts in Russia. Broniver was a big activist. There was a group of different Jewish organizations, Shamir, Chama, Ezras Achim. These are different Chabad organizations that were doing secret work in Russia. And Broniver was one of the prime activists. I want you to call the Jews in Russia, and I want you to tell them that soon they're going to leave the country and everything's going to change. He's astounded. Gorbachev is prime minister, premier 3 weeks. He gets on the phone. He calls some activists in Moscow, and the guy tells him, listen, there's a KGB car in front of my house right now. My wife was taken in for questioning, and the sense of disbelief is beyond belief. The next day, he writes in a report to the Rebbe that he made a series of calls, and he says nobody believes it, and the Rebbe says the change is underway, but it's just not apparent.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
We all know what Gorbachev did, that Gorbachev went in the late 80s, early 90s, he changed the policy of the former Soviet Union, and he allowed Jews to leave.
So there, the Rebbe warning them and having foreknowledge about this planned fall.
Wow.
Okay, let's get, yeah.
It's pretty wild. I mean, it does remind me that one of the tactics of the Russian deep state, especially during the transition from the Soviet Union to the Russian Federation, was, and this is exposed in Craig Unger's book, American Compromat, which goes actually into the deeper background of Trump being cultivated as a Russian asset. It points out that similarly to the way that the Israelis use, loyal Jews around the world to as Sayanim, the term Sayanim, the idea of helpers, that there's a network of a few 100,000 dedicated to Israel Jews around the world that can be called on by this small Mossad human intelligence officer corps to supply help to them. And in Unger's book, American Compromat, it points out that especially during this period that's being highlighted in this clip, that the sort of going down, allegedly, Soviet Union is using the immigrant Jews who are leaving, a lot of them to Israel, and that 90%, I think, over 90% of them are compromised on the way out so that they can be turned into basically what you might call Soviet Sayanim, to be called on for help down the road. And
as
so
opposed to a
Vatnik.
Vatnik. As opposed to a Vatnik, which is a Westerner that does Russian propaganda or spies for Russia.
Exactly. Yes. A Vatnik, would be a sort of a Western Russian media asset or cultural asset of some sort. And this would be actually someone in the human intelligence sphere that could be called on. That would be my short term for it, is that a Soviet Sayanim complex being run especially via the Jewish emigres at that time. And you'll notice too that there's this key Russian mob figure, Semyon Mogilevich, who's part of this Tel Aviv meeting of organized crime. I think it's 1995 in Tel Aviv. And he's seen as the brainy dawn of dawns of the entire worldwide Russian organized crime network. And he's an agent of the Russian deep state. And he was known for fleecing Jews on their way out of the Soviet Union. So it actually could be that that's part of the Soviet Sayanim network. It's actually run by a similar kind of network that then also lubricated the greasing of the wheels for turning Trump and his entire global real estate empire into a Russian deep state asset.
Okay, let's get into the Ukraine meeting. It's going crazy viral. All the Trump MAGA people are just elated. They're so happy about this. They think it's so badass. Let's see here. I thought the deal was already made, too. Trump said they can fight on, and we're getting our minerals, and he's going to support them some more. And then I guess that's not happening. I thought it looked like the war was going to keep going on with Russia. Before Trump got in, I predicted that he would negotiate a peace screw deal for Ukraine. So maybe that's back on the table, because it looked like he was going to be backing Ukraine if there's some deal, right? Until at least unless Putin made a deal. But first he starts by commenting on, he says he's all dressed up today, obviously, sarcastically.
Zelenskyy.
He is wearing something new today, though. It's not the normal green shirt. He's got his, what do you call these? Henley, the little button up there with the Ukrainian seal. Maybe this one's louder. Oh, shoot.
He's all dressed up today.
It's like it's a little boy like going to church, like all dressed up. Okay, so cute. No, they also ask him if he owns a suit, making so much about this suit.
My second question for President Zelenskyy. Why don't you wear a suit? Why don't you wear a suit? You're the highest level in this country's office, and you refuse to wear a suit. Just want to see if do you own a suit?
Problems.
Really?
I don't have such. I will wear a costume after this war will finish.
Ooh.
Yes.
I will wear a costume after the war is finished.
Whoa.
Maybe
Wow.
wow.
Maybe something like this.
something like
Yes,
yours,
sir.
yes.
That'd be great.
Maybe something better. I don't know. We will see. Maybe something cheaper than yeah.
Maybe something
Thank
cheaper.
you. Thank you for
He turned that one around, actually, made him look kind of bad. Wouldn't it be funny if, like, Trump started wearing a military general outfit? That would be
They
great.
will after if and when they do a false flag of some sort. He'll. No, I think.
Yeah,
this
when
is
Gog and
really
Magog
smart.
war with Iran and Russia and China starts, maybe he'll put on the George Washington.
After he deploys Eric Prince paramilitary forces around the country. Yeah.
Yeah, now Eric Prince wants a $25 billion contract to go and round up and do those deportations. Oh,
Yes. Yeah.
what a coincidence. Oh, and by the way, all the FAA troubles, guess Starlink's going to come in and take the big contract from Verizon to do, sky traffic control.
Yep.
Okay, so they're hating on his suit. And then now Trump also says, I do like your clothing, by the way.
But you know what? I do like
See?
your clothing.
Yeah,
We're starting with the lighthearted nonsense.
I do like your clothing.
yeah, really?
Even though I think he's a great guy,
Yeah.
by the way. I don't know if you two like each other, but you know what? I think
No,
he's dressed. I think he's
why?
dressed
I like
beautifully.
this guy. I don't.
I think he's dressed beautifully.
So
I think he's dressed beautifully. That's hilarious.
And by the way, did you notice that there was this very interesting moment when Zelenskyy was asked a question by Barack Ravid from Axios in I think it was in Europe. And Barack Ravid has this background. He worked for Israeli military intelligence unit 8200. And Zelenskyy says, "Oh, Axios, I've heard a lot about you. You always seem to have my phone calls before everybody else does." So I actually thought that was actually because there's a lot of stuff. Okay, Zelensky's a Jew, so he's just sort of serving the Jewish state and all this. But Netanyahu's Israel has been very hostile, actually, and they basically just gave them almost nothing in defensive weapons, didn't even allow Zelenskyy to come to Israel, and really what they now
Didn't
just
join
came
the
out of
sanctions with
UN.
everybody else against Russia. And when asked,
Exactly.
I remember Netanyahu was asked to condemn Putin, and he his connection broke out, and he couldn't hear out of his earbud anymore all of a sudden. I'll have to try to dig up that clip, but I wouldn't know how to find it. Okay, so now here's the full 10 minutes. There's a bunch of clips going around, 2-minute clips, but I want to see the whole thing beginning to end. So if you want to interrupt, I'm going to try to keep my mouth shut. Otherwise, it'll take me 2 hours to get through this. So if you want me to interrupt, though, at any point, just put your finger up or just start talking, and I'll stop it.
To the front lines.
Okay.
Both of them, you'd never have a deal. You want me to say really terrible things about Putin and then say, "Hi, Vladimir, how are we doing on the deal?" That doesn't work that way. I'm not aligned with Putin. I'm not aligned with anybody. I'm aligned with the United States of America and for the good of the world.
Not aligned with Israel? Uh-oh, that's pretty anti-Semitic. Did he forget about our greatest ally that we're totally aligned with?
He's a bad Jew. You're a bad Jew.
I'm aligned with the world, and I want to get this thing over with. You see the hatred he's got for Putin. It's very tough for me to make a deal with that kind of hate. He's got tremendous hatred, and I understand that, but I can tell you the other
Putin, on the other hand, just loves Zelensky. And Putin, Dugin love the Ukrainians.
side
Oh my
isn't exactly
gosh.
in love with, him either. So it's not a question of alignment. I'm aligned with the world. I want to get the thing set.
Oh.
I'm aligned with Europe.
With the
I wanna see if
multipolar
we can-
world.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Get this thing done. You want me to be tough? I could be tougher than any human being you've ever seen. I'd be so tough. But you're never going to get a deal that way. So that's the way it goes. All right, one more question.
Hey, I want to respond to this. So look, for 4 years in the United States of America, we had a president who stood up at press conferences and talked tough about Vladimir Putin, and then Putin invaded Ukraine and destroyed a significant chunk of the country. The path to peace.
Hey, I'm glad they're wording it that way. He invaded Ukraine and destroyed a lot of the country.
And the path to prosperity is maybe engaging in diplomacy. We tried the pathway of Joe Biden of thumping our chest and pretending that the President of the United States' words mattered more than the President of the United States' actions. What makes America a good country is America engaging in diplomacy. That's what President Trump is doing.
Can I ask you?
Sure.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So he occupied our parts, big parts of Ukraine, part of East and Crimea. So he occupied it on 2014. So during a lot of years, so I'm not speaking about just Biden, but those time was Obama, then President Obama, then President Trump, then President Biden, now the President Trump, and God bless, now President Trump will stop him. But during 2014, nobody stopped him. He just occupied and took. He killed people. You know what the contact line?
2015.
2014.
2014.
2014.
Yeah. So how did he
I
kill?
was not here.
Yeah, but
I was having a best-selling, best highest-rated show, Apprentice, that time. My bad.
I'd just been to Moscow for Miss Universe in 2013. Flown by my good buddy Phil Ruffin, the Las Vegas real estate guy who sold his building to an Israeli billionaire.
Trump's like Trump got owned by Macron. He got corrected by Macron, and now he just got corrected by him as well. Now he's got his head down. Have you noticed too the chair? Like all of these world leaders are inches shorter than Trump, or for some reason in the chair setup, Trump always looks smaller.
Yeah, and he's like hunched over too.
Right.
yes, but during 2014 till 2022, the situation the same. The people have been dying on the contact line. Nobody stopped him. You know that we had conversations with him, a lot of conversation, my bilateral conversation, and we signed with him, me, like a new president. In 2019, I signed with him the deal. I signed with him, Macron and Merkel, we signed ceasefire. Ceasefire. All of them told me that he will never go. We signed him with gas contract. Yes, but after that, he broken this ceasefire. He killed our people and he didn't exchange prisoners. We signed the exchange of prisoners, but he didn't do it. What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the president for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine that you say what problems we have?
I have been to.
Count one.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring them on a propaganda tour, Mr. President. Do you disagree?
Oh, like Tucker Carlson didn't go on a propaganda tour to the grocery store in Russia.
Yes, exactly. And as if like JD Vance didn't start this whole thing. He started litigating the case then, and then Zelenskyy just was okay. We're going to litigate the case in front of the press.
Yeah, and then he says you're disrespectful.
Yes.
This is very rare, though. Usually they just smile and shake hands and say everything's going to be great, and then they go in front of the cameras, and then they go behind closed doors. And maybe this is more common than we think when they actually.
Zelenskyy and Trump were trying to play nice in the beginning, and Zelensky's like, he's powerful. I think he has the best interests of Ukraine in mind. And so this is broken down very quickly. You know, Zelenskyy didn't want to alienate Ukraine by being too tough on Trump. And you remember, a lot of this began to break down when after Trump made it very clear that he was going to cut Ukraine out of the actual diplomacy.
Yeah, they didn't have a seat at the table at the Saudi Arabia. They just had a Saudi Arabia meeting, and Ukraine wasn't even there, right?
Yes, exactly. And he had to be sort of told on the side by MBS or something about that, and then he was brought into his own by, I think, by Qatar to just have a presence there, so it couldn't be seen that he was totally cut off from the regional actors in that case. And J.D. Vance had just gone, has been to Europe to lecture the Europeans about how they're allegedly, are anti-American principles, anti-democracy, anti-free speech. And he repeats this total Russian black propaganda line that was used to cover up the Russian role in the 2016 elections by saying if $200,000 of Facebook ads can disrupt your democracy, then maybe you don't have a strong democracy. And meanwhile, it's very clear by now that Russian political warfare is way deeper. It includes lots of Facebook activity across all social media. Now they have Elon Musk deploying Twitter into the European sphere. And
look what we saw with Tenet Media. Also, that's just the one that got caught.
Exactly, and you'll see that just in the last days, there's this big hullabaloo in Romania where Georgescu, who's repeating the exact same kind of Birnbaum, Finkelstein, Netanyahu talking points about the Soros boogeyman and globalism, and we're sort of the real Romanian patriots. He got raided by the Romanian authorities, and it turned up, heavy arms and $10 million in cash under the floorboards of one of his security network who'd been to Russia and all of that. And so more and more begins to look like, oh yeah, the Russians are waging deep political warfare against the entire European sphere, especially the eastern part, but not just there. And this is one thing that Greg and I noticed fairly early on, that there was an alignment of Russian and Israeli interests against the European sovereignty, and each for their own reasons. And you saw Michael Oren, who is this sort of former American Jew who then becomes an Israeli, becomes their ambassador, and he starts saying the European Union basically has to be rolled back, very similar to clean break language about Syria in terms of that.
And Trump just said the other day that the EU was started to screw America, so he's having his anti-EU stuff. And then there's the Elon AFD Germany stuff. I'm sure that was Russian connected as well, Russian influence.
Exactly. You can actually go see in my Twitter threads. You'll see that you have Dugin reposting Elon Musk say you have to vote for AFD, and Dugin basically says if you don't elect AFD, we're going to have to come in and reoccupy Germany, and then we're going to split it up again between the United States and Russia, basically. And so it's very clear that Elon Musk and Dugin are sort of pushing parallel lines in this whole sphere, basically. And what happened was, and this I'll just finish up, where the interests are aligned, is that what you see is the clean break doctrine that basically, overthrew Iraq, destabilizes Libya, destabilizes Syria, overthrows Libya, really, and then all of these refugees from the area then stream into Europe, and so the Europeans have legitimate concerns about this sort of uptick of immigration and all of the cultural and political aspects that come along with that. And then the Russian, so that's a very Israeli. The Israelis become the vector for driving a lot of people into Europe. The Russians too. The Russians took part in major bombing in Syria that was also part of driving people into Europe. And then the Russians then come up and say, yes, now you need to vote for basically our Russian asset parties in order to address. So it's problem, reaction, solution, and they're acting Russia, Israel are acting as a pincher move, a deep geopolitical pincher move against European sovereignty.
You see so much of the noticing online and the anti-Zionist influencers online are all huge Russia simps and Putin simps and always toe the Russian lines on things. And I saw in the chat, it reminded me, Anatoly Golitsyn's New Lies for Old talks about the Trust Project, just like we see Trust the Plan and QAnon, controlled opposition, pretending like it's anti-Zionist, anti-globalist. And really, it's trust the plan and sit back and wait and don't worry. The good guys are in charge. The white hats are in control. That type of narrative. Saving Israel for last. Trust the plan. Like such psychological operations. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and that's like a century-old operation in many ways. And Golitsyn's public publishing, which happened mainly in the 80s, I think, should be taken very seriously. But there's a deeper question around James Angleton and Golitsyn in terms of the high-level Soviet intelligence penetration of the CIA, especially. And now it's come. Yeah.
You're hinting at that New Lies for Old is a psyop in a psyop?
I'm not yet able to. I'm not saying.
You're just saying take it with a grain of salt. That's basically what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and this is somewhere. This is, and you asked me in the beginning about where some of my areas of immediate interest are, and one of those is tracking down the nature of long-term Soviet strategic deception in terms of these kinds of alleged, double agents who come into the mix. Because everybody at this point knows that Angleton, who sat at the counterintelligence desk of CIA for more than a decade, also sat at the same time at the head of the Israel desk, is some kind of compromised agent of some sort.
Angleton was an Israeli agent. Wasn't he buried or something in Israel? Is that right?
He wasn't buried there, but he has two different memorials to him in Israel. So
that's what it was.
And he was
involved with Anatoly Golitsyn. Was he also involved with the other communist detractor? What I'm forgetting his name right now. Bezmenov.
Defector?
Was he also defector? Yeah.
Bezmenov came through Canada, I think.
And that was later too. That was way later than Angleton, right?
I think Angleton was already out of power. He was taken down by Colby. But by the way, there were these investigations into it became into Angleton and one of them actually he was tasked by Angleton to investigate this high-level Soviet penetration inside of U.S. intelligence. And the guy, after like years of work and combing through the files, came to an idea that it was 80% likely that Angleton himself was the Soviet mole. But just in the last years, we now have John Newman, who was key to JFK in Vietnam and understanding the flip on Vietnam policy after Kennedy was assassinated and Johnson came in. We see these massive flips on Israel policy, Israel nuclear policy, Israel lobby policy, but we also see a flip on Vietnam policy, which also ties into these Jewish power American Zionist networks in terms of general dynamics and the Crown family and all of their interests actually in Vietnam itself.
We're going to get more into the Epstein thing, and the JFK and Epstein truth is supposedly going to come out. If anybody thinks that all of these Zionists are going to give us all the details about the Zionist involvement in either of those two things, you're crazy.
And then, Adam, can I just close the loop really quickly on Golitsyn? Mm-hmm. There's a book right behind me here called Widows, right over there. And I was indicated its presence by a keen researcher on Twitter who pointed out to me that in that book, it points out that Golitsyn disclosed to Angleton that he was actually in the same role as Angleton, but in the Soviet Union. He ran the Israel desk for Soviet penetration of Israel. Okay, and so that's what we're actually sort of have to consider then. We have these two guys from each side, Soviet Union, then bringing to the United States in terms of Golitsyn, and then Angleton are both running the Israel desk, especially in terms of penetration, counterintelligence, and all of those things. So I'm not saying necessarily, I think, especially even if, let's say, Golitsyn is a real high-level Soviet chess move that enabled Angleton to basically destabilize American and more generally Western intelligence. Everybody knows that. Angleton drove U.S. counterintelligence into a ditch at key moments during the Cold War, which is partially why he had to be removed. He also was obviously servicing these Israeli interests over decades, including through the Kennedy assassination, the USS Liberty. Angleton is central to the USS Liberty attack and actually framing the USS Liberty to be attacked by Israel. And so I'm just saying that it needs to be considered whether this might be a high level, it's called like Maskirova, right? Strategic Soviet deception operation at the highest levels. And so, and as everybody knows, the best disinformation is 90% true. And so that if I were to go into a question of Golitsyn's actual analysis in terms of the perestroika deception and all of that it may be looking for very specific misleading points that have crippled maybe open source Western counterintelligence at this point in terms of the actual what's actually going on right now.
Something just came to my mind. I'm like trying to think like what could be the angle, and I'm not saying this is it. It just came to my head, but I'll get your thoughts on it. If they're trying to pretend like the fall of the Soviet Union was planned and faked, but it wasn't, then that would make them appear stronger than they really are. Like, isn't that one of the art of wars? Like, pretend to not be strong when you are, or strong when you're not. So anyway, just
yes, no, that's a very good point. That's like the definitely art of war, very art of war, and I would also say that it could be. There's a major question about what Putin's regime really is. Is it really just a continuity of like ideological communism and the Soviet Union? Was the Soviet Union really even like ideologically communist by the end, or was it actually an authoritarian deep state? Patrick, one of our patrons on The Antidote, pointed out last night to us that the symbology of Putin's Russia actually includes both the Russian imperial double eagle, double phoenix symbology, but then also the red star from the Soviet Communist Union, basically. So in a certain way, you can imagine a hybrid re-imperialization of the Russian deep state that incorporates a pre-Soviet architecture, and it could be somewhere in that realm of people of good faith, anti-communist analysts looking for a continuity of ideology, whereas this is more about geopolitical power politics, and it's not necessarily being run by a sort of hardcore communist ideological elite.
I see. $25 super chat from Boleslaw says, I've left a bunch of links about the connection between Putin and Jews in Israel in the Johnny Gatz channel's community. Should be relevant. At Johnny's Ghost. Yeah, if there's ever a time that Johnny decided to get back on the field, it would be a good time. If he's watching, if he's still out there, what's up? $10 from Soothing Sound says, hey, Adam and friends, been a while since I caught a live stream. Have some shekels. Thank you for the shekels, Soothing Sound. Watcher says, Kim Philby, architect of MI6, kneecapped the British intelligence in the same way during the Cold War. Read Ben McIntyre's book, A Spy Among Friends. Kim Philby and the Great Betrayal. He was a double agent the entire time.
Crucial point, actually, and then it's actually come out from the Matrokin archives that Philby was actually crucial to diverting British counterintelligence eyes in the run-up to the Zionist King David Hotel bombing. And there's articles out there. If you go look for like Kim Philby and the Rise of Israel, King David Hotel, you'll find the facts that point to that Philby, while he was still undercover as a Soviet agent, was the one who pointed British intelligence toward Lebanon at the same time as the Irgun and the Stern gang were actually going to bomb the British at the King David Hotel. So, and then there's a very interesting book called The Fifth Man that talks about Victor Rothschild as this key missing Soviet-Israeli intelligence operative at the highest levels of British society in relationship to the Philby network.
Interesting. I just had another thought too. It's like with Anatoly Golitsyn, it's kind of trying to keep the Cold War alive. So like we've seen all of the media, it's like the Russian investigation and everything's Russia and Russia owns everybody. And then that kind of does distract away from Israel influence. So that could be the benefit too.
That's a very good point, because that is the analysis is now really proving out that Israel, not only Israel, but the entirety of the Israel-Palestine so-called conflict was a key long-term geopolitical tool of the Soviet Union. And they backed both sides. They backed the Palestinians more overtly, and they had assets in place. Basically, the Likud party is formed out of what looks to be Soviet assets of some sort. At least they're partners in many ways. So you have Netanyahu, obviously, Ariel Sharon. There's key and actually go look at John Swin's Expose the Enemy graphic about the background of every single Israeli prime minister coming from Soviet spheres of influence. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that every single one of them was actually operating on behalf of Soviet interests. Actually, the second prime minister, Moshe Sharett, tried to make a break, it looks like, and try to bring Israel more into the post-World War II American Western fold, but then he was undermined by Ben-Gurion and Moshe Dayan and this whole crew that did the Lavon affair attacks in Egypt that ultimately broke apart the covert CIA diplomacy that Eisenhower was working between Nasser in Egypt and Sharett in Israel. And then Nasser in Egypt immediately turns totally toward the Soviet sphere for his weapons. And then at the same time, they drive all of the Jews out of, not all of them, but almost all of them out of Egypt, just as Israeli intelligence was doing these false flag bombings in Iraq against the Iraqi Jewish community that was old and, traditional there, and drives most all of the Iraqi Jewish community back into Israel. And so there's this deeper geopolitics where there's always these elements inside of Israel that also seem to serve these Soviet interests of breaking off potential regional partners to the Americans back into the Soviet sphere.
Interesting. And then last super chat, and we'll get back to this video. Zorn Der Edom says, great discussion analysis. Please discuss how Jeremy's theories fit into bigger Zionist goals, World War III, etc. That's what I was just going to say, too. It's like there is prophetic agenda of pinning America against Russia and Iran as well. So them wanting to keep that going for sure. Okay, let's see. Still a comment from Edom. My hypothesis is Jewish power is simply using Russian state power to help control, compromise, fog Trump's loyalties. All actors, American and Russian, ultimately serve Zionist interest. Agreed? ? Do you agree with that?
I'm not
actors.
Sure
okay, go ahead.
I don't, that's not what the totality of the evidence suggests to me. And that goes back to this question of Putin driving out the Jewish oligarchs. Now, it is possible, yes, you could say that there's this covert arm of Chabad that controls Putin and controls all of this Soviet deep state. But I don't get the sense that that's actually the nature of the relationship. Now, obviously, the Jewish power dynamics behind Chabad have their own interests that they will then use in relationship to Russia and Ukraine. We just saw this major, right? Wasn't it a major marriage between Chabad Russia and Chabad Ukraine? There is obviously this question of Ukraine and the Ashkenazi roots and all of that kind of thing. So there are these dynamics of where these aspects of Jewish power are playing all sides. At the same time, to me, it looks like that there is an actual actual Russian deep state that looks out for Russian imperial deep state interests, and that's what we're seeing. So I do think this is a major question: is the nature of the new Cold War? Is there actually meant to be a global conflict between the United States and Russia, or the United States and China? Or is in many ways this being used as a Jewish power attack against the global hindbrain? It's also very obviously this is the Russians have used these threats of a combination of global nuclear war, World War III will commence. I mean, we saw this happening throughout the entire transition from Biden to Trump. Alex Jones was leading the charge that if the United States finally allowed the Ukrainians to utilize the weapons to actually strike back at Russian targets from where the aggressive war was being launched from, there would be an immediate nuclear war between the United States and Russia. And so there's a twin pillars of what I identify as very Russian-oriented disinformation. Threats of civil war in the United States, and then threats of world war against the world. And you see people like Tulsi Gabbard, Tim Pool, all these kinds of people pushing the civil war kind of rhetoric all throughout the Biden years. And it doesn't mean that there's not those real potential threats, but my sense of it is that these are actually high-level global black propaganda efforts in order to actually drive the real geopolitical interests of basically harmonizing a multipolar world order where it's in a both Russian and Israeli dominated American state in league then with what Dugin calls the other major poles in the world, Russia and China. And that's what we're actually seeing Trump deploy, is basically we're going to split up the spoils of Ukraine, and we're going to be back in partnership with Russia and all of that. And if you go look at it, the actual so-called legitimate geopolitical strategy that was pushed for actual like American high-level thinkers in terms of the Trump operation was that we were going to align ourselves with Russia and break Russia away from China, okay? And that's where things like Golitsyn's analysis, I think, can come in very handy and important, and that is very likely strategic deception, and that Russia is not going to be broken off from China. They're going to continue to be in partnership and naturally aligned in many ways, and all that they're trying to do is with their major partner in the Jewish state of Israel, they're trying to then take via a Russian-Israeli asset president, very likely compromised by money, by sexual perversion, compromise that's likely on audio-visual. We'll talk about that with Epstein. And they're trying to bring them back into this fold of where there's only three world powers. And what's so deceptive about this, it's obvious that Russia shouldn't be an actual, if there's only going to be three poles of world power, the only thing really that would give Russia that place at the table is the threat of their nuclear weapons, which they always throw around. Putin walks around sometimes with the briefcase very close to him when he's doing so-called negotiation, basically as a threat against the world. And we do know, obviously, there's a very similar structure in many ways that are inverted between Russia and Israel in terms of the nuclear weapons. Israel is more covert about their threats of nuclear weapons. I would assert they're the ones who have used tactical nuclear weapons through decades especially after the Cold War ended, allegedly. But even before that, people can go look at Bruce Baird's analysis of the Beirut Marine barracks bombing potentially being in the realm of an Israeli nuclear false flag of some sort. So on through then 9/11, the Israelis actually deploy tactical nuclear weapons in terms of global false flag terrorism, drive the war on terror. But then the Russians actually overtly threaten that's their power. I mean, there's countries in Germany that have way more modern nukes than Russia does, and they have countries that have economies that are as powerful or more powerful than Russia. And so that's the lie, I think, of the multipolar world order. And yes, I do think it involves the Jewish power very, very deeply, especially in terms of the idea of setting up, you know, the Ben Gurion idea of Jerusalem at the center of the world. So we do have to keep our eyes on the moves that are being made there. But until further evidence, I'm suspicious of the actual threats of nuclear war, and that they're actually just being used to blackmail people into this multipolar architecture.
Okay, here we go.
Agree that you've had problems bringing people into your military? And do you think that it's respectful to come to the Oval Office of the United States of America and attack the administration that is trying to prevent the destruction of your country?
Where is there an attack? Has there been? Did I miss the attack? What did he say?
A lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning. Sure. First of all, during the war, everybody has problems, even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless. God bless. You will not have war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that. Remember this. You're in no position to dictate.
It's funny that he's like, the war could come to you. Why is Trump promising to have an Iron Dome for America if there's not a risk of war with Iran and Russia and China?
And if Zelensky were being fully honest, he would basically, and of course he can't really do this diplomatically, he would basically see the war has already cut, the same war that has come to Germany and Romania and Hungary and Brexit in the UK, which is all of them very Russian-Israeli political warfare dynamics, has already come to the United States. And that's why I'm talking to this Epstein, Maxwell, Putin, Mogilevich compromise puppet in the White House at this point. So the fact that I'm talking to you right now is proof that the Russian-Israeli war has already come to your shores and actually has already claimed the White House. That's my sense of what's actually going on here. And
he should have called him a Putin agent. He should have been like, you and Elon work for Putin. I think he does. He says something like Putin says that. We'll see that in a second here.
He does, and the one last thing is that
he goes, I heard that from Putin too. That's the quote I saw. Go ahead.
And Zelensky is actually, this is real diplomacy to some extent. This is actually what we're seeing is real diplomacy. These are the kinds of conversations that probably actually happen behind closed doors when high-level diplomatic negotiations are happening. But it's now been brought out into the open. And what Zelensky said originally that seemed to have caused Trump to call him a dictator and say that he needs to have elections now, we need to replace him, was only saying that what you just said, that it sounds like Trump in saying that Russia didn't invade Ukraine or that we started the war, that sounds like Trump has been swimming in Russian disinformation waters, is all that he said, I think. And then Trump then sort of lashes out and calls him a dictator.
Yeah, it's like they're trying to portray Zelensky as bad and Ukraine is bad for like opposing Russia's invasion. They're just supposed to bend over and just see, let them have the areas they took or something. But wasn't this meeting so that Zelensky could come and sign their $350 billion agreement?
Yeah, their business agreement. Yeah. It was supposed to be nice and like we've agreed to the sort of and you'll see this whole thing runs out as like a mob scene. And J.D. Vance is sort of like they're both trying to enforce respect, bow down, kiss the ring, loyalty, thank us for all that we've done for you. But it turns into an actual conflict. And the one thing I will point out is that Zelensky won't quite say this, but it is the case that the Biden years were riddled with sort of using Ukraine and not actually supporting Ukraine fully. And this is partially because of the capture of the neocon and Zionist interests high level in the Biden administration, that they wanted to use Ukraine to sort of soften up Russia, to bleed out Russia. And so there is this very disgusting, immoral aspect to long-term American foreign policy that's been captured that is partially to blame for this situation.
What we're going to feel. We're going to feel very
you will
good.
Feel influenced.
We're going to feel very
I'm
good and
telling
very
you,
strong.
You will feel influenced.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. Right now, you don't. You're playing cards.
He said, "We're not playing cards."
By the way, this was one of the things. One of the things that happened in Trump Tower was these very Russian, Ukrainian organized crime and crime syndicates that seem to answer back to the Russian deep state, who are running these high-level poker operations just a few floors down from Trump's place in Trump Tower. So Trump is actually sort of disclosing what all of this is. This is really a sort of a Russian-sponsored poker game where you don't have the chips to even be at the table with us.
Mm-hmm.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Is he going to lecture Putin like that and say the same thing? I doubt it.
And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country, that's backed you far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once? This entire meeting? No, in this entire meeting.
It's just like a 2-on-1 like bullying session. You're disrespectful. Have you said thank you? Like, I don't even get what he said. What's going on here? I thought he was coming here to sign a deal. This is crazy.
Thank you. You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
Please, you think that if you will speak very loudly about the war,
He's not speaking loudly.
Oh my God, they're not even letting him talk. They don't even, they just berate him, and then he starts to talk and they interrupt him right away and then say, "You're being disrespectful."
That if you will speak very loudly about the war,
He's not speaking loudly. He's not speaking loudly. Your country is in big trouble.
Can I
Wait a
answer?
minute. No. You've done a lot of talking. Your country is in big trouble.
I know.
You're not winning. You're not winning this. You have a damn good chance of coming out okay because of us.
Mr. President, we are staying in our country, staying strong from the very beginning of the war. We've been alone, and we are thankful. I said thanks
you haven't
in
been
this
alone.
cabinet,
you
and
haven't
not
been
only
alone.
in this cabinet.
We gave you, through this stupid president, $350 billion. We gave you military equipment, and you men are brave, but they had to use our military.
What about
if you didn't have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3 days, I heard it from Putin. In 3 days. This is something
maybe
new.
less.
In 2 weeks, of course he has.
It's going to be a very hard thing to do business like this.
Again,
I tell you.
Just say thank you.
Except
that there are disagreements, and let's go litigate those disagreements rather than trying to fight it out in the American media when you're wrong. We know that you're wrong.
But you see, I think it's good for the American people to see what's going on.
Wrong about what? He just says you're wrong. Like, about what? This is wild. We're going to read these super chats in a second once we're done with this clip. We're 2/3 of the way through. Go ahead.
It is interesting because the Zelenskyy did take that moment. He's like, I thank the American people. He thanked the American people, and now then J.D. Vance tries to step in and say he's insulting the American people when he's just basically having a diplomatic, hard conversation when he's being attacked, it looks like, in terms of defending Ukrainian interests. And you remember the way that Zelenskyy turned down the original the alleged $500 billion, the United States and BlackRock, we own $500 billion of their mineral and other resources. That's the beginning of the talks. He basically said, I can't agree to that. There will be someone after me who stands up for Ukrainian national interest. They're not mine to give away to you in many ways. And so that's sort of like the background here, is that this is an attempted sort of negotiation amongst the troika, the global troika of treason, Netanyahu, Trump, and Putin, and they're trying to cut everybody else out of the deal, including the American interests, including the European interests, all while China sort of sits there and watches and very happy.
I think it's very important. That's why I kept this going so long. You have to be thankful. You don't have the
I'm
cards.
thankful.
You're buried there. Your people are dying.
tell you
You're
again,
running
I
low on
know.
soldiers. Listen, you're running
Mr.
low on
President.
soldiers. It would be a damn good thing.
Mr.
And then
President.
then you tell us, I don't want a ceasefire. I don't want a ceasefire. I want to go and I wanted this. Look, if you could get a ceasefire right now, I tell you, you take it so the bullets stop flying and your men stop getting killed.
Of course, we want to stop the war.
But you're saying you don't want a ceasefire.
But I said to you,
I want a ceasefire.
with guarantees.
Because you'll get a ceasefire faster than an agreement.
Ask our people about ceasefire, what they think.
That wasn't
Doesn't
with
matter
me.
for you what-
That
what
wasn't
this
with me.
means. It
That was
wasn't
with
with
a
you.
guy named Biden, who was not a smart person.
This
That
is
was
your-
with,
this
that was
is
with
your
Obama.
president. It was your president.
Excuse me. That was with Obama, who gave you sheets, and I gave you javelins.
Yes.
I gave you the javelins to take out all those tanks. Obama gave you sheets. In fact, the statement is Obama gave sheets and Trump gave javelins. You got to be more thankful. Let me tell you, you don't have the cards.
They've said that like 20 times, and he keeps saying, "I am thankful. I am thankful." This is like gaslighting. Wow.
It reminds me of like what probably happens behind the scenes behind, like between like the ADL, like Jonathan Greenblatt or I forget, Abraham Foxman probably, and like people that, you know, especially like Black Americans who have made, you know, Israel critical or Jewish power critical comments. You have to give us thanks for the fact that we didn't take away your job and your entire income and ability to support your family before we have a talk about moving forward. That's what it reminds me of. Kiss the ring before we can talk.
Yeah, you know who else should be thankful to America? Netanyahu. You think he's going to berate Netanyahu? Like, you should be thankful. You're listening to me. I'm in charge. Not even close.
Trillions of dollars of American resources over decades, if you factor it all up, plus like the actual real physical fallout from the Iraq War, especially, which is probably, you know, we're up into well over 100,000 veteran suicides that are very likely due to the unjust and criminal aspect of the war that they were deceived into.
It's actually the other way around. When Netanyahu and Trump get behind the scenes, it's Netanyahu berating Trump, saying, "You better be thankful, Trump. We got you elected. You wouldn't be anybody without us." Just like, remember, like the leaked FBI redacted Jerusalem contact with Roger Stone and Corsi? We have the intel. Trump will lose without it. That type of thing. That's what Netanyahu tells him. Netanyahu will be like, "You want those Epstein tapes released? You should be thankful we haven't released those Epstein tapes. You should be thankful we bailed you out for billions when you were completely underwater with your investments."
Exactly.
That's probably how it happens.
Exactly. And by the way, I'll just point out that in the background of the first meeting between the Russians and the Americans, where the Ukrainians were cut out of it, on the side of it, you see this Russian-Ukrainian sphere fertilizer oligarch, Dmitry Rybolovlev, sitting there. And Rybolovlev is the one who basically almost tripled Trump's price in his Florida mansion that he beat out Epstein for, right at the time in 2008 when Trump had major problems, as the entire American economy was beginning to have problems. So it's very much related that Trump knows that the presence of Rybolovlev, who at the time he commented to Michael Cohen, he says, "I wonder if this is a gift from Putin. I wonder if this is a gift from Putin that this fertilizer oligarch Rybolovlev has tripled my money when I needed it very intensely." So whether or not there is actual sort of physical compromise on Trump, Trump knows the nature of the background here, and that he knows that the Russian sphere, these high-level guys...
Yeah, with his Felix Sater company, his Felix Sater Chabad Award winner, real estate deals. I remember that in the Active Measures movie, talking about that big real estate deal you just mentioned there.
Exactly, and that's what you'll see is that it's all these former Soviet oligarchs, you know, so they're not all Russian, but they're all from the former Soviet sphere, and it looks like they are all currently deep state Russian assets, and then also then now with the conjunction with Israel, they were the ones who were flowing these hundreds of millions of dollars all around Trump properties. That's why I posted that graphic of both his sons saying, yes, we don't need American banks because we got the Russians, and then Trump denying, I have no connection to Russia. Hoax, Trump collusion hoax.
Right. Okay.
With us, you have the cards. But without us, you don't have any cards.
One more question to Mr. Vice President. I'm sorry, here.
It'll be a tough deal to make because the attitudes have to change.
What if Russia breaks ceasefire? What if Russia breaks peace talks? What do you do then? I understand that it's a heated conversation right now.
What are you saying?
She's asking, what if Russia breaks the ceasefire?
What if anything? What if a bomb drops on your head right now? Okay? What if they broke it? I don't know. They broke it with Biden because Biden, they didn't respect him. They didn't respect Obama. They respect me. Let me tell you, Putin went through a hell of a lot with me. He went through a phony witch hunt where they used him and Russia. You ever hear of that deal? That was a phony Hunter Biden, Joe Biden scam. Hillary Clinton, Shifty Adam Schiff. It was a Democrat scam. And he had to go through that. And he did go through it. We didn't end up in a war. And he went through it. He was accused of all that stuff. He had nothing to do with it. It came out of Hunter Biden's bathroom. It came out of Hunter Biden's bedroom. It was disgusting. And then they said, oh, the laptop from hell was made by Russia. The 51 agents. The whole thing was a scam. And he had to put up with it.
By the way, Adam, this is another thing that's been pushed, after there was like the sort of Trump-Russia collusion hoax, which was managed because of the deep Israeli involvement in the original, installation of Trump. Like you're talking about, Netanyahu has the goods on that. He knows that the Israelis came in and helped Trump be installed the first time. And then the involvement of our alleged ally in Israel is then used as a way to limit the hangout of the entire investigation. Even as part of the Mueller investigation, began to pop up all these Israeli elements involved. And so that was then shut down very, very quickly. And so then that's then used to say that the entirety of the Russian side of it is a total hoax.
Yeah, so it actually runs cover for the actual Russian-Israeli involvement.
Exactly.
That's what you're saying.
And so it's a weaponized dialectic where they use the involvement of both in order to cover up the involvement of the other. And that's why I see it as very similar structurally to the Russian-Israeli attack on European sovereignty in many ways. And then what I wanted to point out is that the whole question of the Hunter Biden laptop is just a replay. In many ways, it doesn't mean that there wasn't real content from Hunter Biden's laptop. It was. The question is, was all of it real? Was there black propaganda put into it? And then the main question is then how did it actually get into the hands of Rudy Giuliani, who was doing all of these deals with these Russian sphere oligarchs and Israelis the whole time? And it turns out that the entirety of like the Jim Jordan investigation into the Hunter Biden laptop appears to rest on the now known fraudulent testimony of this FBI asset, Alexander Smirnov, who is an Israeli with a Russian background. So the same thing that they're saying about the 51 U.S. intelligence people are saying that there was Russian propaganda behind the Hunter Biden laptop. It's partially true, but it's the same thing as Trump-Russia collusion, that they're limiting the hangout that is actually, in this case, mainly an Israeli poll involved in it, and then included Russian aspects in terms of to having compromised Hunter Biden.
With that, he was being accused of all that stuff. All I can say is this: he might have broken deals with Obama and Bush, and he might have broken them with Biden. He did, maybe he didn't. I don't know what happened, but he didn't break them with me. He wants to make a deal. I don't know if you can make a deal. The problem is, I've empowered you to be a tough guy. And I don't think you'd be a tough guy without the United States. And your people are very brave. But you're either going to make a deal or we're out. And if we're out, you'll fight it out. I don't think it's going to be pretty, but you'll fight it out. But you don't have the cards. But once we sign that deal, you're in a much better position. But you're not acting at all thankful. And that's not a nice thing. I'll be honest, that's not a nice thing. All right, I think we've seen enough. What do you think? Huh? This is going to be great television, I will say that. All right, we'll see what we can do about putting it together.
Hold on.
We'll see, I don't know.
All right, that's it. Go ahead.
If there's anything we can be thankful to Trump for, it's good television, which is why he was selected to be this agent in place in the first place, is that he has TV charisma. He has a TV background. As you were pointing out earlier, The Apprentice, Mark Burnett. There's also, you remember Mark Burnett, who helped facilitate the Trump's Apprentice, was also in the works of doing a similar kind of thing with Putin. Okay, so in many ways, this guy has been installed in place because he helps create good television, which we're seeing right here.
Mm-hmm. Can't deny that. Elon Musk says, watch this carefully, very important. That's the clip we just saw. You're gambling with World War III. We watched this. This is going to make great television. I think it's good for the American people to see what's going on. What if, okay, we got all these. Okay, this is now they're taking questions. This is him talking about the rare earth minerals are going to be for AI and weapons.
How much money is the U.S. going to put into the fund that is being created today, and how does this provide long-term security for Ukraine?
Well, we don't know exactly how much because we're going to be putting some money in a fund that we're going to get from the raw earth that we're going to be taking and sharing in terms of revenue. So it's going to be a lot of money will be made from the sale and from the use of raw earth. And as you know, our country doesn't have much raw earth. We have a lot of oil and gas, but we don't have a lot of the raw earth. And what we do have is protected by the environmentalists, but that could be unprotected. But still, it's not very much. They have among the best in the world in terms of raw earth. So we're going to be using that, using it for all of the things we do, including AI.
You mean like minerals? Raw? He keeps saying we don't have enough earth. Raw earth, yeah.
No, they have the most raw earth anybody's ever seen.
Yeah. The way he describes Ukraine, remember when he was like, it's just completely flat. They're shooting each other on the fields. It's so flat. They're raw flat earth. Okay, here we go.
And including weapons and the military, and it's really going to very much satisfy our needs. So it's something that just worked out really well. We have a lot of oil, and we have a lot of gas, we have a lot, but we don't have raw earth. So this has just about every component of the raw earth that we need for computers, for all of the things we do. This puts us in great shape.
Okay, super chat from WTAS for 5. He sent a few in. First one is Zelensky's boss, Ihor Kolomoisky, dual citizen, told New York Times that he would take $100 billion to flip and join the Russians. There's possibility that Zelensky is working for Russia and Israel.
That is possible, but here's what it looks like, and it's definitely the case that Zelensky has a similar kind of background in a way to Trump, except he was never this big real estate Russian mob guy.
Actor.
Russian is He basically an actor. He did his TV show that helped him rise to prominence and actually be, put into that position was this Kolomoisky-backed TV show
where he was the president. In the TV show.
He became, he was sort of playing himself. So there's, people should go look at Hyper-Normalization, the Adam Curtis documentary out of the BBC that really sort of shows the meta-architecture of the media warfare propaganda behind all of this, including Trump and Putin. And Putin had this guy called Vladimir Surkov, who was seen as the Gray Cardinal, who pursued postmodern political warfare that included basic sort of Leninist kind of things of lead the opposition and all of that. But it also engaged in much deeper operations, even in Ukraine. And there's actually a leak of Surkov's emails that shows the actual intent over the long term of the Russian desire to take Ukraine back over, whether through political warfare or through an invasion. But the one thing that I think would maybe say that Zelenskyy is not anymore under the throes of Kolomoisky is that Kolomoisky was actually arrested by the Ukrainian officials, and then basically made his bank sort of nationalize his bank. And Kolomoisky is directly connected to the 2016 Cleveland RNC that helped, that Arthur Finkelstein was sort of behind the political machinations, mainly behind getting Trump into the RNC architecture that was then delivered in Cleveland, which is the main U.S. city where Kolomoisky has major investment. So I agree. The question of Kolomoisky is a big deal here, and the question of Zelenskyy as an asset, whether he was sort of a Russian asset of some sort, because he did do TV in Russia, I think, at some point too. But it looks like that there's a Ukrainian national sovereignty that's way more powerful than any potential asset that's put in front of them. And that's what we see going back. And that's why they try to disparage the Ukrainians as all neo-Nazis or Azov battalion and that whole thing. That's all Russian black propaganda. It doesn't mean that doesn't exist there. And you'll see Kolomoisky's connection actually to like Azov battalion. So that would suggest that Kolomoisky has probably been actually running sort of Russian interest ops in Ukraine for longer than he's admitted.
Yeah, I think another super chat mentions Azov and how that gives Putin the justification to denazify that narrative. What was I going to say? Oh, I just saw that apparently we're missing context. There was like 40 minutes of them talking before the fight broke out. So maybe he was not being very nice, or he was not being thankful at all. And we missed that. But Crazy Fool 702 says, great guest today. Keep keeping us informed. This news is vital. Thank you. And another from DW Toss says, 25% of the top 80 richest men in Russia are Jewish. The richest man in Russia is a dual citizen named Mikkelsen. Abramovich put Putin into power. Russia and Israel are one entity. Is this one of your guys? This doesn't seem like I don't recognize the name. DW Toss 2. I have a feeling he is.
I don't know.
And another one from him or her. Zelensky's pimp, Ihor Kolomoisky. Is that how you say it? Ihor? Ihor? Ihor.
Ihor.
Ihor, yeah. He's a real Ihor.
E-girls and E-hors.
E-girl, yeah. Finance Azov Brigade neo-Nazis. This was to give Putin his pretext for denazification. Zelenskyy may be a Kremlin aligned.
Maybe. I think there could be that background, but my sense is that the Ukrainians have this very strong national sovereignty aspect that it will not be defeated in many ways, and that they basically, even if there is that background, which there obviously is in terms of Zelenskyy and Kolomoisky, I get the sense that like let's call it the Ukrainian national sovereignty and deep state has sort of captured a potential asset. That's at the very least, I think that's what's going on. And people do criticize. You remember that Trump basically said you're running out of soldiers and recruitment and all of that. That is one of the areas where Zelenskyy has been criticized by the more maybe ultra nationalists in Ukraine, is that he actually tried to keep the youngest men out of this for a while, and that's why they recruited very, very heavily and aggressively from the older men in order to fight this war. But there's really deep, dirty machinations in terms of the way that this was all set up from inside of Russia, from inside Ukraine, from inside the United States, and then this Israel component sort of in the background there.
Okay, another from DW Ta says, quote, this is a quote, "If I put on glasses and look at myself like the whole rest of the world, I see myself as a monster, as a puppet master, as the master of Zelenskyy, someone making apocalyptic plans." And that's from Kolomoisky. Okay.
Whoa.
All right, here is Trump's answering question, says he wants to be remembered as a peacemaker.
I hope I'm going to be remembered as a peacemaker. this would be a great thing if we could do this. I'm doing this to save lives more than anything else. Second is to save a lot of money, but I consider that to be far less important. So I hope I'm going to thank you, Brian, for that question. It was a nice question. I hope I'll be known and recognized as a peacemaker. This would be a great thing to solve. This is a very dangerous situation. You know, this could lead to a third world war. This was headed in the wrong direction. If this election were lost, if we didn't win this election, and by the way, we won it by a lot. That was a mandate. We won every swing state. We won the popular vote by millions and millions of votes. We won everything. The districts, you look at the areas of red, take a look at a map. This was a big mandate, and this was one of the things. I said, we're going to get this thing settled. If we didn't win, I think this could have very well ended up in a third world war.
Trump says a whole lot of nothing, and it's just self-aggrandizing himself nonstop, or doing his political talking points is all he does.
Yeah. And a lot of it is actually deceptive, or at the very least incorrect. The way he talks about, we gave you $350 billion, as if there was actually $350 billion of cash that was delivered to Zelenskyy. That didn't happen. Even if that's close to the amount that the weapons have been valued at. But meanwhile, those weapons were American made. They were a lot of them were just sitting there. And many people have actually done an analysis of the actual value of the weapons that we gave to them, which really sort of served our military industrial complex. A lot of it is throughout the, the middle of the country, and that the actual value of the weapons was actually under $100 billion. And even less of that is actually direct aid, political aid, that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of just sort of, remember Trump was saying just a few weeks ago, millions and millions of people were killed. Okay. I don't think I haven't seen any figures like that that are actually accurate.
He just likes saying billions and billions and millions and millions. It's his, that's his thing.
Grillions and zillions and trillions of who knows what. Yeah. And even just on the surface, now I'm suspicious people should go look at Stephen Spoonemore, who's probably the 21st century leading expert in the United States of election fraud, who immediately analyzed the election as very likely stolen by a man-in-the-middle tabulation attack. The same kind.
You're saying 2024 was stolen? I just saw John in the chat said the rigged election. I guess he's referring to our most recent one.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
And yes, and you go look at Stephen Spoonemore, and I posted some of his interviews that he did after the election. And he goes through why he thinks that it was very likely a man-in-the-middle tabulation attack. And he's the one who was actually front and center for proving that there was the same kind of attack that helped seal the deal for George W. Bush in 2004. And at the same time, Manafort and Karl Rove had this guy called Mike Connell, who was their IT guru, who was at the epicenter of that election fraud in 2004, who had then also been sent with Paul Manafort to Ukraine. And Manafort at the time was working for the Russian-backed politician Yanukovych in Ukraine, whose opponent Yushchenko got poisoned, it looks like, by very likely Russian-supplied biological or chemical weapons of some sort, and then the people who looked to be involved fled to Russia. So yeah,
I remember
what I'm saying. Oh yeah, go for it.
Trump said on election night after he won, he said Elon was so good in Pennsylvania with the voting machines. He said something about Elon knowing the voting machines. I thought that was a little odd.
You remember, and then there was this whole controversy in the summer of 2024 of Trump repeatedly saying, "We don't need the votes. We don't need the votes. Why do you need the votes?
And you'll never have to vote again, too."
That's
in the same speech. He said that same time.
That's very true. And just on the surface, they keep on calling it a mandate. Even in terms of what we're recognizing as the official vote count, they didn't even get 50% of the popular vote. Yes, they appear to have won it at this point by a few million. They didn't win it by millions and millions, but they got under 50% of the actual popular vote. And that's hardly a mandate. And so they keep repeating this mandate thing. And you'll see this. This is the background of Trump with people like Roy Cohn, Roger Stone, all these types of people. And Roger Stone, Trump, and Steve Bannon all were indicating pre-2020 election that they were going to cry fraud no matter what happened. If Trump appeared to lose, they were going to cry fraud. And then the last thing I'll point out is 2016, when I begin to get understand the scale of Trump's lying around elections, is when he claimed that he lost the popular vote in 2016 to Hillary Clinton by 3 million votes by saying 3 million illegals voted, and that's the only reason we lost the popular vote. And there was no evidence of that. The only person that would even go on TV to defend him was Chris Kobach here from Kansas, who'd had no evidence, and no one's ever shown that that's even close to true. So Trump lies. I think Trump's lied repeatedly through 3 different election cycles.
Mm-hmm. So we have the MAGA influencers we covered on the stream yesterday, getting their Epstein declassified notebooks, right? I wanted to start with one of the guys that was there is Jack Posobiec, who goes to Zionist Organization of America conferences and is completely in with the whole Trump MAGA crowd. Bannon, right? He does the show with Bannon as well, Steve Bannon. So he was there. And it reminded me of you. Maybe people in the chat don't know, but you've been confronting people and you've been in this game a long time, done more than any trolls that we may see at exposing Israel and Zionism and conspiracies. So here is Jack Posobiec in his Epstein files, phase 1. This is you asking him about Epstein's Israeli intelligence connections back in 2020. And he seems very uncomfortable with this line of questioning and not at all sincere when he says the Epstein network should be taken down. And what does you say, what do you think about Epstein being Mossad? And he says, I don't know what to think about that. So unsurprising that somebody like him would be invited for this photo op.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. Thank you.
We're going to get in Jeffrey Epstein being Israeli military intelligence.
I don't know what to think about that.
It's pretty bad. We should root it out.
What's some stickers there?
His main contributor, Les Wexner, was one of the leading.
Hold on. He seemed more eager to talk to you.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. Thank you.
We're going to get in Jeffrey Epstein.
Maybe not.
Israeli military intelligence.
I don't know what to think about that.
He's going to laugh off the idea that he's Mossad and no comment at all. And by the way, for people that don't know, this is Jeremy, my guest, recording, confronting Posobiec 5 years ago on this.
It's pretty bad. We should root it out.
What's some stickers there?
His main contributor, Les Wexner, was one of the leading propagandists for the Iraq War. Do you know that?
Good, guys.
Taking advantage of American girls to compromise American politicians for foreign.
Jeffrey Epstein got what he deserved, that's for sure.
Did he? Or is he on a beach somewhere?
Or
was he silenced? Was he silenced to cover up what he knows about Trump?
Yes, and was he actually potentially turned back to American intelligence after his first arrest? And so that they actually were, and that's I forgot that he said he got what he deserved, which is very interesting. I would say morally, yes, especially from what we for sure know from what he was doing, and especially from like the 90s, what we really know what he was doing. He got what he deserved.
So him committing suicide, the official story, the official story is he committed suicide in jail. obviously he wanted to do that. So that's his way of going out. Although apparently they're saying he was just meeting with his lawyers and he was ready to fight the case and stuff. But no, he didn't get what is deserved. He was silenced so that he can't go around and do interviews saying Trump was involved and he was best friends with Trump for 10 years. Like, we do have the interview of him saying that.
Yes, and it's now come out there, the recordings, some of the recordings and Steve Bannon has a lot of the recordings that he's not releasing, and then Michael Wolff has all these recordings that he just finally started to leak a few of them right before the election. So we don't really have any public interest people out there. And he did say, Epstein did say that he had knowledge that could bring down the entire American election, and that was in 2016. Because of course, and actually there's actually video too from the Dole Institute of me in December of 2016 questioning both the high-level Trump people, including John McLaughlin, who came straight out of Netanyahu's office, and the high-level Clinton campaign people, and the high-level MSM people, including New York Times and CNN, about the background of Robert Maxwell, Israel super spy, and Ghislaine and Jeffrey Epstein basically looking like foreign intelligence operatives, especially for Israel. And shouldn't the American people have been given this information, especially by the press, if not by the campaigns themselves, that we were given a quote-unquote choice between two compromised candidates by a foreign intelligence operation? So, yeah, I mean, so it's obviously the case that you know, Epstein was in the middle of litigation. And one of the important pieces of our justice system is it's not only about accountability for illegal activity and wrongdoing, but it's also about the victims, but it's also about for the public to then get more information about what actually happened, who did who were these other so-called Epstein list people.
Yeah, if he's facing life in prison, maybe he would squeal and out everybody. So they had to silence him. He didn't get what he deserved. That's the most suspicious part about all of this, saying he got what he deserved. You think the victims of Epstein are happy that he was allowed to commit suicide and not go to trial and not be held accountable and not have everybody else involved be implicated?
Exactly.
And now he's still part of the cover-up. He's right there at the White House with the binder.
And it looks like just like they're basically re-releasing the FBI vault that was already released almost 5 years ago, and that they're trying to redact stuff after the fact or something like that. And I agree with you. Thank you for pointing that out. The fact that Posobiec said that he got what he deserved is really, I think, very telling, because it was obviously not fair to the victims, because now what's happened with them is they basically, some of them, if they have proper standing, they get some amount of payout. But the way these kinds of things work, that the payout comes in relationship to non-disclosure in many ways, and that they then can't even get the truth or speak the truth from their perspective. So in a certain way, you know, maybe Epstein so-called got what he deserved if it's actually true, but we the people and his victims still have not gotten what we deserve, which is truth and justice.
Right, and I think we can see the angle of why they did the, oh, look, we got the truth now. Most transparent administration in American history. Hey, guys, you can all go back to sleep. Trump revealed the truth about JFK and Epstein now. Nothing to see here, guys. No big deal. It was just Clinton and the Democrats and the Chi-Coms, like they're trying to push. Look at this. All the people that are there are all doing the exact same line. This is the most transparent administration in American history. That's the PSYOP right there.
I saw see someone say, you're right, this is the most transparent administration in history because we can see through you. Right. And it's like, let's do a PR photo shoot with the biggest Zionist influencers on social media to make people think we're actually doing something. Yeah, get all the Zionist propagandists in here, and then I'm sure we're going to get the truth from them about the Epstein Mossad connections. Okay, we'll finish this here.
But he has
Takers, folks?
It's a network.
That's true, and the network needs to be taken out.
All right, how
no question.
Do you think Trump should actually support rooting out the network that he was involved
Trump
in?
should absolutely take out.
Dude, you almost had him choking. You think Trump's gonna take out the network he was involved in? Dude, you got him so pressed right here. Where was this at, by the way? Stop the Steal?
This is Greg and me outside of a Trump rally in, I think, Des Moines, Iowa in January of 2020. And so I just spotted him and I was like, Greg, look, it's fucking Jack Posobiec over here. So we just sort of turned the camera on him and then he was passing out flyers to people in line for the rally. And then we actually ended up going into this rally where we were like, every so often we would chant things like more Epstein lawyers when Trump would say things. And like we didn't want to get dragged out. And so we just sort of said enough to sort of interject a little bit of, let's think here, people. And the guys in front of us started turning around on us. But we got away with not being like threatened by Trump. You remember Trump would like say, haul them out of here, take them out on a stretcher, so he's actually very a violent kind of mob boss. We did get taken out of the rally after it was all over, after I went up to the mainstream media people at the back and started questioning them about the exact same thing about Epstein and Israeli military intelligence, Wexner, Iraq war, Trump. And it was Major Garrett from CBS who I was talking to. And he was actually talking to me a little bit more friendly than Posobiec was. And then it looked to me like some kind of like very sort of like it seems she was probably Jewish Zionist agent, immediately inserted herself, says they got to go. And then the entirety of like the sort of security and police then came and escorted us out through these like almost like booing Trump people at the very end.
For the old heads, you may remember this was the first time I ever saw you too, before I was ever making any videos online. You were in the crowd and you asked Christopher Hitchens a question about 9/11. And that's when I first saw you way back then in the day. So like I said, why I called you an OG is because he's been doing stuff like this. Next, we're going to play when he called into Epstein's lawyer Dershowitz on C-SPAN and put him on the hot seat. We'll finish this, and then I got a question for you.
Trump should absolutely take out the Epstein network.
He's fumbling his words.
No
his lawyers.
question.
It's sort of hard to take out the network when your lawyers are part of it.
Totally free if you want to.
Yeah. Okay, and here's the cringe music for the antidote, which I left in there just for you. I could have clipped that out, and it would have been a little short.
No, you probably should have clipped it. That was just some like random loop that I'd worked on that I wanted to throw.
I did clip out the beginning because I clipped out the beginning that said where it was at and stuff. So when you did this and you recorded this, could you feel the awkwardness and how uncomfortable he was by this question? Did everybody else notice it? Isn't it totally just transparent? He can't hide it. What do you think?
Yeah, it looked like he was trying to turn right there. He'd already like started to turn away. He's like, I don't really want to talk about this. So I was uncomfortable at that point. I was like,
totally disinterested. But now he cares. Now he's going to go to the White House and give us the truth about Epstein, guys. But when he's actually questioned about it and brought up with Epstein and Les Wexner and Trump's connection, he wants nothing to do with it.
And I'll just point out that now I have a more nuanced view of like the actual timeline of the Epstein operation, and people might want to go look at Deanna Calderon's work about. It looks like Ehud Barak might have actually been like compromised by Epstein after his first arrest. Remember the whole Alex Acosta thing, that he belongs to intelligence. To me, it's clear that Epstein belongs to Israeli intelligence before his first arrest. All throughout the 90s, he's in the Clinton White House like over 10 times. He seems to be part of like the Anthony Blinken network that relates to Robert Maxwell, Samuel Passar. Samuel Passar's, I think it's his niece or daughter, Leah Passar was part of the Clinton White House. So there was this very Israeli intelligence element inside of the Clinton White House that I think Epstein was a key part of. And it's the same time period that you have Israeli military intelligence actually compromising the White House communication systems via cutouts, and they're redoing the communications in the White House. And there's this backdoor to Israel inserted at the very same time. But then after Epstein is arrested, it looks like Ehud Barak is potentially turned into an asset of American intelligence, and then Ehud Barak basically goes behind the back of like the rest of Israeli security architecture and helps the American government establish a potentially anti-Samson option, high-level American reconnaissance package in southern Israel.
That could be because Ehud Barak is now making public statements that Netanyahu's controlled by the crazy rabbis that want to blow up the world to usher in the Messiah. So. Or maybe they were trying to blackmail him. Maybe it was Netanyahu and Likud trying to blackmail Ehud Barak because for some reason.
Yes, and the case is that Ehud Barak and Netanyahu go way back. Mm-hmm. They're both Sayeret Matkal, and people might want to look into the idea of a Sayeret, S-A-Y-E-R-E-T, is Israeli Special Forces reconnaissance units. And basically all of these key people, both I would say in terms of front and center after October 7th, but also the 9/11 operation, they all seem to be the Sayeret Matkal Special Forces, quote unquote, behind enemy lines. That would include Netanyahu in the United States. They consider us an actual adversary. We should consider them an adversary. Ehud Barak behind British enemy lines on BBC saying this is a war on terror. Bin Laden did this. The Americans are going to have to fight forever. All of that kind of thing. And so Barak was actually the commander of Netanyahu in Sayeret Matkal. And it looks like, so pre-Epstein arrest in the, in the mid to late 2000s, Ehud Barak and Netanyahu are part of this sub-Rosa Israeli military intelligence special forces team that are very likely the fixed point of actually logistically doing the 9/11 operation. But then after this, potential compromise by Epstein after his arrest of Barak, it looks like maybe there's more of some kind of political split, although I'm wary of any idea of real splits inside of the Israeli security state.
Me too, obviously. We got another one from Zorn Dur Edom, says Trump is a groomed golem WWE reality actor and salesman for Zog. That is his credential and role in this clown show. I agree and say the same thing all the time. Thank you, Aaron Schwartz, for 20, no message, and another 20 from El Diablo Blanco with the thumbs up. Appreciate you guys for the support. It's been a great show. We're already at 2 hours. I forgot to ask how much time you have. Could we go another 15 or 20 maybe to finish this Epstein stuff?
Sure. And I just want to make one point on that. Yesterday I was in a big Twitter space about these Epstein files, and even some of the MAGA base was beginning to get really uncomfortable about it. And I blurted out at some point about how Trump was very finicky about releasing the Epstein files. And there's this edited Fox News video clip of them asking him, will you release the 9/11 files? Will you release the JFK files? Will you release the MLK files? Will you release the alien UFO files? Yes. Yeah. Epstein.
I meant to look for that clip again. That one could go really well right now with the latest. But yeah, that tells you everything you need to know.
Exactly. And so that, I think, suggests Trump knows how deeply compromised he is by this Epstein network. He knows that those videotapes very likely exist somewhere still. And that he does not want to do this. And then I pointed out to MAGA folks that this had happened. They didn't believe me. So then I linked that video clip. And then basically I said, this is only probably happening because this is like MAGA golem gone wild. Fight. And so there is this aspect of like the MAGA base who are of good faith, who have been duped by this Zionist golem Trump, are actually now sort of like having to confront that he's been duping them.
Here we go. I found that clip. I want to watch that.
PBD. I hope it's not all talk. Can we hear this 13 seconds?
Declassify the 9/11 files.
Yeah.
Would you declassify JFK files?
Yeah.
Would you,
I did a lot of it.
Would you declassify the Epstein files?
Yeah, I would.
That's crazy. He had to think about that one. He said he'd.
I remember it being worse than that, honestly.
It was. That was the edited video clip, because he actually goes and says, "No, I don't know. Maybe because there might be sort of innocent parties implicated."
Oh shoot, maybe they stopped it too fast. That's what it was. Okay. All right, let's move on. Also, there is the new libs of TikTok, the Hasidic princess. She comes from a ultra-Orthodox Chabadnik family in Los Angeles. She was completely astroturfed by the likes of the people here, Jack Posobiec and Cernovich, and these, MAGA Zionist networks, right? She's the libs of Jewish Chabadnik. And then Cernovich was there. Cernovich, who says that you're anti-Semitic if you think Mossad was involved with Epstein, and you're let's play
what
this.
I don't like,
and also he was involved with the case too, right? He did it like an injunction or filed something to try to, and he was accused of working as a proxy for Dershowitz to help him in the trial. Dershowitz is Epstein's lawyer, and also wins Chabad awards and is ultra Zionist. Trump's lawyer as well.
That's one of the reasons why we were talking about Epstein lawyers at this 2020 rally and outside of it with Posobiec, was because of Dershowitz. Dershowitz stepped in for Trump's impeachment trial, but there was a whole bunch of other.
And you know who else did? The lawyer, the other lawyer that Trump had for the impeachment was a Zionist Organization of America board member. I forget the name. I could look it up.
Actually, I think that might have been one of the other Epstein lawyers too. Yeah.
Oh, I think you're right, actually. That's so funny. Trump's got the same lawyers, and you think that he's going to give you the truth? I'm going to have to look that up right now. But
what is interesting is that this is the cover they have, is that Dershowitz and Cernovich, I think, were working for certain files to be released so they can pretend that they're on the side of transparency and all of that. And this is one case maybe where Dershowitz actually told the truth, is that in Virginia, one of Virginia Giuffre's, her case against him, it appears that she's acknowledged that she might have made a mistake. Now, this may be true or maybe not, but it makes sense to me, is that Dershowitz said that Virginia Giuffre had mistaken him for Nathan Myhrvold, who was the chief technology officer of Microsoft, who helped push Microsoft deep into Israeli military intelligence arms, and was also one of the American assets that Epstein appeared to offer up to his Russian contacts over 25 years ago, I think.
Okay, so it's David Schoen was the lawyer for Trump's impeachment, and he is the board member of the Zionist Organization of America, an Orthodox observant Jew. He was also Roger Stone's defense lawyer, too. And I'm not sure about Epstein. I'll have to do...
it was one of the other lawyers who was an Epstein lawyer. But this guy's the key one, actually, I would say, behind Trump. Zoa. And you'll see that there's this sort of very Zoa aspect behind the rise of Trump, where they'll even have people like Matt Gaetz. They'll say, oh, he's anti-AIPAC, or he doesn't accept AIPAC money. Meanwhile, he's been, signed. He's getting sort of co-signed by Zoa.
Dude, look at this. David Schoen, the ZOA lawyer, was the last person to meet with him before he was killed he died in jail.
That is the key. That is the key Epstein lawyer also. Yeah.
Lawyer who met with Epstein days before his death is also Trump's lawyer. They've got the same lawyers, Dershowitz and Schoen, as Roger Stone and as Epstein and Trump. Come on, guys. The fix is in. That's why I titled this "The Fix is In."
The fix is in, and exactly, and the fix in this case is Epstein got what he deserved in this case. When did that happen? That happened under Trump. It was actually what they call the Sovereign District of New York that finally brought that second case against Epstein, and then the last person who seems to have major influence over the prison system is Bill Barr, Trump's attorney general, who then goes down there, and then soon thereafter, the whole Epstein thing problem is gone away.
He also represented Steve Bannon, too. I'm surprised he's not Alex Jones's lawyer. Wow. What a resume. What a small world, huh?
Yeah.
Funny. And now here's Cernovich. He's also there in the crowd. The new media, guys. The new media. Where's Cernovich? Okay, he's in the photo. But anyway, here's Cernovich talking about how you're an anti-Semite if you think that Mossad had anything to do with Epstein.
So what I don't like is people who are biased, and we all have them. I don't like that I hear people immediately go to the Clintons or Mossad, because that's just not sophisticated, first of all, and it's vaguely anti-Semitic.
You're just not sophisticated and anti-Semitic to think Mossad was involved.
I like vaguely anti-Semitic.
Yeah. Okay, John Swin just shared the Wikipedia of David Schoen. What am I looking for here? Expose the enemy. Did we not cover the important parts?
Chairman Mao? That's interesting. What was that about? Huh?
Representative Steve Bannon. He wears a yarmulke. Okay, that's all I see, basically. Represented Roger Stone and briefly Jeffrey Epstein before his suicide, and he's the one who defended Trump. What a coincidence that Trump's 2 impeachment lawyers are also Epstein's lawyers. Imagine that.
And I think there's even another Epstein lawyer, you know.
I mean, I wouldn't be at all surprised.
It's like Epstein Island, Epstein Lawyer Island, all the way down, basically.
Mossad. Well, why? If Epstein were with Mossad, he'd be with the FBI too, right? You really think if Jeffrey Epstein was working for Mossad, that our own FBI wouldn't have intercepts of those conversations?
No, Mossad doesn't keep things from the FBI. They don't have encrypted lines. They can't come and meet him in person. Like, come on.
And the FBI has had major penetration by the Israelis and by the Russians, by the way, over many, many years. Like, go look at like Robert Hansen and all of that. And it's very, especially the New York office of the FBI. Go look at that. I mean, we even know like that the sort of head of counterintelligence of New York FBI, oh, shoot, I forgot his name. He was then indicted for being compromised by foreign elements, including Oleg Deripaska from the Russian-Israeli oligarch.
Clown world. I feel like I'm taking crazy pills with all of this. And then all the Trump people are like, oh, Trump's not with him. Even leading Epstein researchers say, oh, Trump kicked him out and Trump doesn't have anything to do with it. And it's just the Clintons and the Democrats and the Chi-Coms, like Alex Jones says.
By the way, that never popped in my mind until you said that, but there's a structural parallel between the stories that were told about Trump kicking Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago to Putin kicking out the Jewish oligarchs out of Russia. And it's partially true, but it doesn't tell the whole story. And actually, by the way, of course, it's after the first arrest of Epstein that Trump sort of splits off, at least publicly, from Epstein. And it does look like they had these, they were going up against each other, and Trump sort of aggressively elbows Epstein out of the way to buy that Florida property that then is ultimately bought up by the Russian sphere oligarch.
Okay, a little more here from...
Right. So why just jump, Mossad? Why just jump there? Why not Civilians Activities Group? Why not... Maybe there's a department in the State Department that monitors this stuff, right?
Well, maybe it could be anybody else, but Les Wexner and Ghislaine Maxwell connections to Mossad. And again, just to emphasize for people that may have missed it, he intervened in the Dershowitz trial with one of Epstein's victims, and the Epstein victim lawyer accused him of working on behalf of Dershowitz. But I'm sure we can trust all these guys to give us the truth.
Very good point.
Stop blackpilling.
I would point out, too, that like people should go back to what was really like sort of the big first journalism around Robert Maxwell, which is Robert Maxwell, Israel Super Spy by Gordon Thomas and Martin Dillon. And that comes out in 2004-ish, I think, years before like Ryan Dawson, for example, he like comes out with his like so-called list and his map and all of that kind of thing. So that was actually some of the first like real big journalism around the background of this network. And in that book, although it said Robert Maxwell, Israel super spy, which is obviously the core of his commitments, he's operating at the highest levels with the head of the KGB, and he would look to be part of the attempted Soviet coup that failed. And so there's always been this question of the Soviet Union in the background of this Israeli connection to the Maxwell network before it even became the Epstein network.
Why go there? And also Clinton, that's just a cliche. They don't have any power. The Prince Andrew, though, royalty, they have power. So it could be the FBI and other elements, not the FBI, qua FBI, but elements within it could be. But that's why I just really am disappointed with a lot of people who are taking hokey, hacky, campy conspiracy theories that are too well trodden, well worn. What we're dealing with is unprecedented, right? What we're dealing with
See, it's just a conspiracy to say Mossad is involved with Epstein.
From the initial charges in 2009 to the civil lawsuit to the criminal charges to you name, everything is unprecedented. So if you're using your same models of thought on Epstein, you're not upgrading. And that means there's a
you don't got your gorilla mindset if you're not. Okay. And now for Jeremy confronting Alan Dershowitz about Israeli intelligence on C-SPAN. 4 minutes. This was in 2019. Maybe they should have had you in there. If we were really getting the truth, they'd have people like you in there getting the Epstein information.
Yeah, Ian Carroll says that if they were real, they would have Ryan Dawson and Whitney Webb. They definitely should have Whitney Webb. Ryan Dawson, I'm way more suspicious of his intent at this point. But I mean, like I'm no journalist around this, but I have done a lot of the public activism and analytical work going back years on this.
Right. Vicky Ward was another one too. Like she was the lead anti-Epstein person, and she had some relationship with Ghislaine Maxwell, right?
Yes, she wrote an article in Vanity Fair about something, the curious Mr. Epstein, and she since disclosed that there was heavy, almost violent threats against her by Epstein, and then her editor at Vanity Fair seemed to capitulate to that. So it turned out more as a puff piece than what she already knew and wanted to help disclose in terms of the abuse and sexual compromise behind the Epstein network.
You know, I hadn't seen a tweet from Whitney for a while, so I went and checked her page, and she hasn't tweeted anything in 2 weeks. And it's probably because the Chile is down with like a huge power outage or something. I'm guessing the internet's down. But I mean, talk about odd timing for Whitney to disappear from Twitter when this Epstein psyop is underway.
And I do want to look at the Chilean grid going down and look at cyber attacks.
Yeah, Mossad took down all of Chile just to keep her off of Twitter right now. Because I'm joking, but her tweets, I'm sure whatever she would be saying about this, it would be blowing up like top of Twitter.
Crazy.
Exposing this. And
she would definitely be going above the head of all of these like sort of Zionist influencers. I do want to point out, these are sort of simplistic, sort of like baseline analyses, but you can see Russian MAGA and Israeli MAGA. And I would also then you say alt-light from sort of 2016 is very Israeli, Israeli, and alt-right is very Russian. Yes. And so it's very similar. I sort of remarked yesterday that this to me looked like almost like a Soviet discouragement operation in the way they sort of bumbling and all of that. But what it really does is it actually sort of makes the United States and our government and the people who voted for Trump look like sort of like stupid and incapable of like sort of following through in a good way, with an overlay then of like a Zionist regime cover-up and limited hangout behind all of it.
And you know, it's interesting, like we're covering, we just covered Cernovich. Cernovich did a podcast with Andrew Tate years ago, and Andrew Tate's been in these circles, the Candace Owens, and there's the photo of him at Trump Hotel with Jacob Wohl and a bunch of Zionist influencers. So he's like completely embedded with these things. And Dawson just can't get off of his knob, the Tate's knob, shilling for this guy.
I addressed it with Dawson yesterday in the space, actually.
Oh, he was there in the space with you. Okay. Shit, I missed it.
He popped up. It's recorded. He popped up after I gave my baseline in terms of the actual national security background of the Epstein-Maxwell operation. And then I actually asked him directly about, like, this is sort of weird, too, that this Tate architecture, credibly accused in Romania and in the UK of underage sex trafficking, and they're obviously part of this massive, network influence operation. And there are these accounts that have disclosed some of, like, the DMs, like Myron Gaines from Fresh and Fit disclosed about Ryan. Basically, Ryan saying, "Okay, I'll be there in Florida."
Tate pays. He said Tate pays.
And then Ryan told me yesterday directly, and I had to sort of take his word at it because I don't, it's only these leaked DMs that he's never gotten paid by Tate. So I don't know what the truth is, but at the very least, what you're pointing out, there's a way bigger influence architecture that includes a lot of the people who came on, especially post October 7th, to become so-called anti-Zionists, and they all tend to just sort of be, glazing the Putin
huge Russia shills, exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
Lawrence, Kansas. Jeremy, Independent.
Thank you for taking my call. In terms of understanding this current political moment and the apparent level of criminality that we're dealing with, I'd like to quickly bring up some books, the authors and content of which...
And guys, this is Jeremy, our guest, calling into C-SPAN with Dershowitz right now in 2019.
C-SPAN should seriously consider featuring, especially in relationship to featuring a guest like Alan Dershowitz and his background and personal commitments. Number one, House of Trump, House of Putin, The Untold Story of Donald Trump and the Russian Mafia by Craig Unger really gives the background of the Trump organization as a money laundering organization that fits into the actual Russian deep state, i.e. national security apparatus with tied into organized crime. Number two, Red Mafia, How the Russian Mob Has Invaded America by deceased journalist Robert Friedman. And then number three, the set of books, Proof of Collusion, How Trump Betrayed America, and now Proof of Conspiracy, How Trump's International Collusion is Threatening American Democracy by Seth Abramson. And then finally, I would ask Mr. Dershowitz to also address the topic of Zev Shalev at Narrative, the Israeli-born former CBS News executive producer, and Whitney Webb, who have reported that Jeffrey Epstein was being run by Israeli military intelligence as disclosed by Ari Ben-Menashe, and the allegations in the book Robert Maxwell, Israel Super Spy, that Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Robert Maxwell, was a KGB and Israeli intelligence agent who worked with the Red Mafia and Mogilevich to set up money laundering instruments around the world. So, Mr. Dershowitz, your background in defending Pollard and then Epstein suggests that you might be an agent of a Russian-Israeli axis. So I'd ask you to address that from a Jewish American.
Dude, that's so base. You just called him a Russian-Israeli asset to his face on C-SPAN. See what I'm saying, guys? Now do you get why Jeremy's here?
He laughed.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's your background in defending Pollard and then Epstein suggests that you might be an agent of a Russian-Israeli axis. So I'd ask you to address that from a Jewish American patriot of conscience perspective. That's me.
Okay. I mean, that's just paranoid drivel. The fact that I'm a Russian agent and I'm an Israeli agent, I'm an independent person. I represented Jonathan Pollard because I thought his sentence was way acceptable.
He was also involved with getting the dancing Israelis back.
That's what I realized after. I really should have brought that up, and I missed it. Yeah.
Way excessive. And the idea that Russia and Israel combined together, they're basically enemies. I mean, Russia supports Syria. Russia supports Iran. Russia supports indirect.
Yeah. How'd Syria turn out? How'd that one age?
And actually, Netanyahu's come out saying we're not happy about who's actually taken power in Syria. And that was actually, we did a debate. You hosted a debate between me and Ryan, actually, back in maybe 2017, 18. And we discussed this exact matter in terms of Israel and Russia working together in terms of it wasn't meant to be a regime change war in terms of both Israeli and Russian interests. It was meant to be a rollback war from the clean break paper in 1996, where they mainly wanted to sow chaos and roll back the cohesion of the Syrian nation state, at the same time as getting rid of their WMD, in that case chemical weapons deterrence, in case of there would be some potential conflict between Syria and Israel. In that case, mission accomplished, and the Russians helped them do it, actually helped remove the chemical weapons after 2014 Ghouta or 2013 Ghouta. So in this case, it's actually sort of played out exactly, it did play out exactly as Israel and Russia wanted. But this last actual regime change piece, I don't think the Russians have suffered, and I don't think the Israelis are happy. The Israelis seized the moment to then start bombing all of these Syrian government facilities that very likely had information, especially potentially Russian-backed information or Israeli intelligence-backed information. So all of that was disappeared, and then seize pieces of what they're, trying to do in terms of the Greater Israel Project. But I think that doesn't. They were obviously working together, Russia and Israel, in Syria in terms of both of their interests. And Russia's interests were to, continue to grow their influence in the Middle East, to secure their warm water port, and to just show themselves as a player in the region. And that Syrian base became a key place for the Russians to further launch their operations into the African theater. So the geopolitics of this are not simplistic in the way that Tulsi Gabbard liked to say of regime change wars. No, go actually read the little 5-page clean break paper. It doesn't call for a regime change war in Syria. It calls for a regime change war in Iraq. Once again, mission accomplished.
True. Exactly.
People who are dedicated to the complete destruction of Israel. Russia votes against Israel at the United Nations on almost every occasion. I'm very proud of my career as a criminal defense lawyer.
Putin never condemns Netanyahu. I've never heard Putin say anything bad about Netanyahu.
And by the way, now Alan Dershowitz should have to deal with the fact that Israel was amongst Russia, the sort of Russian-Israeli captured United States, North Korea, and then a handful of other very sort of Russian-Israeli, Chinese captured multipolar countries in voting against Ukraine, basically not condemning Russia for the invasion. So now it's on the UN record, Mr. Alan Dershowitz. Russia and Israel are working together.
I have defended some of the most controversial people in history. I think of myself in the tradition of John Adams, who represented the Boston Massacre soldiers who were accused. I think of myself in the tradition of so many other defense lawyers throughout history who have endured criticism for defending the most unpopular people of their age and generation. I'm 81 years old. I hope to continue to defend people you don't like and people who most Americans don't like, because the need for a defense attorney to stand up to excesses of the prosecution and paranoid excesses of the kind you've expressed in your views about Epstein working for the Mossad. What intelligence agency would trust Jeffrey Epstein to work for them? These are just allegations that are being thrown out there. There's no truth whatsoever to any of them, and certainly no truth to any claim.
Who would trust Epstein? I don't know, like all of the huge billionaires and famous people that he was friends with.
Prince Andrew,
yeah,
MBS,
Prince Andrew,
Ehud Barak,
yeah,
the FBI. I mean,
yeah, not a very convincing argument there. Maybe that's why they killed him, because they couldn't totally trust him, Mossad.
That I have ever been an agent for any foreign country. I'm a loyal, patriotic American. My grandparents came here to get away from...
Dude, you're a loyal, patriotic Zionist, too. Are we going to ignore that?
I mean, he's admitted that he was on Kim Iverson's show, and she asked him about the Epstein Israeli intelligence. Now, I just want to point out, too, everyone always says Mossad. I actually didn't say Mossad. I said Israeli military intelligence. Now, I would actually rethink using the Zev Shalev stuff in terms of Ari Ben Menashe, because Ben Menashe is also not quite a trustworthy source, but Ben Menashe did say Israeli military intelligence, which is not Mossad. Mossad is human intelligence. And so this is an important difference too, because if you look at the celebrating Israelis, right, that Dershowitz, like you pointed out, defended, they were not Mossad. They were Israeli military. They were Israeli military intelligence, which is what Unit 8200 is. And all of these people, like, for example, Kash Patel's girlfriend works for
PragerU.
Unit 8200. Marissa Strait.
Oh no. Yeah. That's right. Kash Patel's girlfriend works for PragerU, and the CEO worked for Unit 8200, or came from Unit 8200 and Israeli intelligence. Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Of Eastern Europe. We love America. We're patriotic, and I'm going to continue to do what I think.
Epic. He didn't think that was coming. He didn't think that one was coming. Another girl that was there, Emily Austin, with the Star of David in her description. She's another one that was invited there, which, like, what is she? How many followers does she have? 97,000 followers. She's invited to go do her thing. They're all a bunch of Zionists. They thought it was a good idea to bring a bunch of Jews and Zionist propagandists to release the truth about Epstein. And, like, did they think that was the best idea? That nobody was going to be suspicious?
This is why I see that there's this aspect where it's so overtly, like, Jewish Zionist on the surface and Israeli intelligence in the background, that there's this aspect of it that reminds me of like Operation SIG and Soviet intelligence types of machinations to hang Israel around only the American neck. And so we'll talk about that in the future in terms of like the deep geopolitics of like Russia using both sides of the Israel-Palestine conflict and how that all worked out. And the point that I wanted to make about the Kim Iverson questioning Dershowitz at some point about Epstein and Israeli intelligence is Dershowitz prickled at that. He basically said, "You've ambushed me," or something like that. But then he said, "There's no hiding. I've been a lawyer for Israel." He wrote a book, Israel, My Most Difficult Client. So of course he's an agent of Israel. He's a lawyer for Israel. That's a contract. That's an agent contract relationship. So he is overtly an Israeli agent. And then people pointed out that he actually starts out by saying, "The fact that I'm a Russian agent, the fact that I'm an Israeli agent." I didn't call it a fact. I was posing it as a hypothesis. And then he says, I didn't assert a fact, but he apparently did.
Yeah. And here's another interesting angle. Amazing Polly has done videos talking about the Wellness Network. It's this Eric Prince connected company that sponsors all the big MAGA shills online. And 6 of the people that were invited to this Epstein disclosure thing are all sponsored by the Wellness Company, which again is connected to Eric Prince.
And Amazing Polly, actually, she did an analysis after the Southern California, the LA fires, that this private fire company that had a contract with LA has a direct connection to this wellness company additionally. And then, by the way, Kim Iverson out of nowhere responds to this and says, they're also one of my major sponsors, but I'm not some kind of ultra Zionist. And so this is why I think it's very important, the analysis that we're doing today is to understand the Russian-Israel dialectic, especially in terms of the media sphere, because you have a lot of these people who condemn Israel for the Gaza genocide, who are anti-Zionist on the surface, and yet I would go see if like actually Kim Iverson has done a lot of repetition of Russian sphere kind of.
Oh, she has. She got busted that she had her manager was Russian or worked for RT, her manager at one point when she first left one of the places she was working at.
Oh, see? So, yeah. So this dialectic is really important. Russian influencers, Israeli influencers, and how they work together. Just go look at Jackson Hinkle, of course. Pre-October 7th, like maybe a year before, he was saying the re-rising of Netanyahu is good for the multipolar world order because he and Putin have a very good working relationship. And now he's, in southern Lebanon with Hezbollah, like Alan Dershowitz like to point out. So the geopolitics of this are a little bit more complex than people like to think. And then I would also include Israel, Iran, and also look at like Iranian benefiting from the Iraq war too, which is a very strange thing, but everyone noticed it. And it was the rise of Iranian regional influence on through into Syria and then the reemergence of the Hezbollah, the southern Lebanon power.
So I'm not at all surprised to see the wellness company sponsoring all these people that were at that Epstein disclosure event. And it's connected to Eric Prince, who's trying to get the $25 billion contract for the deportations right now. Prince is connected with the Council for National Policy, the right-wing Christian Zionist group, right? He was doing he owns Blackwater, helped train Project Veritas, right? And what was the other thing I was going to go for here? Eric Prince. Does Eric Prince have Russia connections that you know of?
Yes. He's the one who, during the Trump-Russia collusion hoax, he's the one who turned up at a meeting with the head of the Russian Sovereign Wealth Fund, Kirill Dmitriev. And so there he has very much a Russian connection, although his most obvious connection, he's actually become an Emirati. I think he mainly lives in the UAE, and that was also part of the 2016 operation, was the whole slew of the Abraham Accords countries. It was the UAE was deeply involved, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, alongside or behind Israel in connection with Russia. And then one of the major things that also then ties in to Eric Prince in Israel is another influencer op. Like if you go look at Sean Ryan's show, right,
yeah,
who interviewed
I was just playing clips of him yesterday.
He features Eric Prince's unplugged phone. Even in that's what I noticed in the interview with Hegseth, is that it starts with this advertisement for Eric Prince's unplugged phone. Just go.
Yeah, made in Israel. They're running ads for this phone, this secure phone, and they go, "It's made in Israel, made by Israeli engineers." Eric Prince. Phone, and it's playing on Rumble. And then the Rumble connections, I'm not sure. I think I saw in the chat Eric Prince is involved with Rumble. I'm not sure about that, but all of these other people, it's like a revolving door with.
Yes, and Rumble, I basically called Musk's takeover of Twitter, and then Lutnick, the next door neighbor of Jeffrey Epstein. Epstein had address 9 and 11, and then address 9 was then delivered to Howard Lutnick. Howard Lutnick, Cantor Fitzgerald, another lucky 9/11 guy like Lucky Larry Silverstein, who misses the event when half of his firm at Cantor Fitzgerald gets wiped out, and he's the one who takes Rumble public, and now he's our
Commerce Secretary.
Commerce. Yeah.
And he was right there with Trump at the Rebbe's grave right before the election. And Chabad, I just watched the video. I'd never seen it of him from years ago. Here it is. Watch this, too.
Told them there's no reason for us to open. I don't care when we open, if we open.
Here's Howard Lutnick interview right after 9/11. Watch what he says here.
Whoa.
Fitzgerald is the primary, it's like the exchange for the world's bond markets. I mean, it is the exchange for the world bond markets. Last year we did $50 trillion in business. Today, the remaining employees of Cantor Fitzgerald and Eastpeak have worked every second since that bomb, and they made the decision.
Since that what? What was that?
Since that bomb? Did he say since that?
He said bomb. He called 9/11 a bomb.
That's like Netanyahu.
Right. Netanyahu made the same Freudian slip. Right. Pretty interesting.
Wow.
Right?
Wow, and I guess Lutnick's brother also died on 9/11, and then that's so this is Lutnick is next door neighbor to Epstein, and that this was previously Wexner Epstein property that's then delivered over to Lutnick. So
and remember the paintings that Epstein had of Bush with the paper airplanes and the towers collapsed, and then of Lewinsky, Lewinsky and Clinton in the blue dress.
It was Clinton in the Lewinsky blue dress, and I don't know if it had the stain on it or not, but that was obviously like Epstein showing that he had like compromise on the American presidents and elite. And actually, I think it was the day of what we called 11/9, because Michael Moore made a film, Fahrenheit 9/11. Michael Moore made a film, Fahrenheit 11/9, about the day that Trump was announced president for the first time. Michael Moore, obviously having a long-term, his agent in Hollywood is Rahm Emanuel's brother, Ari Emanuel. Their father was an Irgun terrorist.
That was Trump's agent too, by the way, Ari Emanuel. And of course, he owns the UFC. So you got Dana White and Joe Rogan and Trump in the walkouts at the small world. Such a small world, right, Jeremy?
Exactly.
Mike Benz, this guy that like tried to infiltrate the alt-right to de-radicalize it and keep it from being anti-Semitic, that's now all over Tucker Carlson and Elon Musk and just exploding, right? He's been busy trying to blame everybody but Israel for Epstein, from Obama to the CIA to the Department of Defense. Yeah.
And but Ben's, by the way, him saying that he was infiltrating the alt-right to de-radicalize it is only what he says. And so this is part of the way that I see it, that the alt-right was definitely created within the Russian sphere, even from back with, and I've had some of
Richard Spencer. Richard Spencer was the leader of the alt-right, and he literally says this, like, whistleblower. He's like basically a Russian alt-right whistleblower at this point.
I mean, his wife at the time was a Russian who was a major translator of Dugin, and the book War for Eternity maps like the path of Dugin and Bannon at the same time. And you can see the alt-right is basically formed in relationship to a lot of the Russian Duginist operations in the European theater. And then it sort of has its sort of push into the American sphere. And so once again, I'll say alt-right, obviously Israeli, and then alt-right Russian, but they work in dialectical warfare in the same way that Putin and Netanyahu and Russia-Israel work together geopolitically.
Right. The pro-Zionist Christians are, so the pro-Israel Christians are all through Israel, funneled through Israel, and then everybody else, all the other stars in alt media that are anti-Israel and anti-Zionist, they're all like through the Russia side. So they're controlling both sides of the dialectic.
Exactly. And in future conversations, we can talk about how this is actually totally following on the structure of the Israeli maintenance of counter gangs. This goes back to October 7th, obviously. Netanyahu being exposed by his own so-called liberal media by basically saying, we have to fund Hamas. If you're against any two-state solution, we have to keep funding Hamas. And then meanwhile, October 7th is done on Putin's birthday in the year after Hamas leadership goes to Moscow. And like you pointed out, there is no serious pushback from Putin against the Israeli genocide in Gaza.
And so many of like this
partner Netanyahu.
This like Christian Muslim like anti-Israel alliance, they're all huge Putin shills, and they're all like discrediting their opposition by being Christian and Muslim and using these Jewish, coming from the Jewish standpoint. It's completely discrediting. We got a $50 dono from Curious Canuckle, I guess it is. That's a new. Thank you for the support. That's first time donator. Says Jeremy, the connection with wellness company is Foster Colson, who owns the wellness company and is a Rumble founder with Prince and Bongino, who just is number 2 at the FBI now. Canadian, we are digging up here. So we got a Canadian Canuck up there digging. They sure are. And what was I going to say?
The real
Foster
Western
Colson.
Alliance, yeah.
Foster Colson. It's the Foster Freeze was the guy that donated to Daily Caller of Tucker Carlson and TPUSA of Charlie Kirk and was a co-founder of Council for National Policy. But
Yeah, and this is Colson is that comments right on the money that Colson is the one with the connection to the private LA firefighting operation.
And Foster Colson also bought up Zelenko pills, the Chabadnik Zev Zelenko, and is a sponsor of, you know, so many people, so many QAnon people, and so many like COVID conspiracy people. Stu Peters even sponsored through that, or at least was at one point. So again,
Yeah.
small world. $20 from Princess Wrongthink. Thank you so much, Lisa, for the support. You're amazing. Up Yonder for 10 says, great show. Thanks. And last question, Zorn Der Edom says, Jeremy, have insights into Syria's capitulation, or I guess their fall, and, you know, the end of Assad.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it looks like this was very Turkish, probably American backing in terms of the eventual downfall of Assad, and I get the sense that the Israelis and the Russians are not pleased. You know, obviously the Israelis are using this in a very bad way to sort of steal some of that south western land of Syria that butts up against them. And I don't know. You know, I'm concerned about where Syria goes from here, but I would keep an eye on Turkey in terms of they're always flopping around in terms of their their relationships, but they also have very sort of pure national interest in relationship to the Black Sea and Russia. Like during the Soviet Union controlled the vast majority of the Black Sea's coastline, and then ever since the fall of the Soviet Union, there's been a little bit more distribution of access to that coastline, which is sort of why Zelenskyy brought up, this war went live after 2014 when Putin's Russia seized Crimea, and then really the reality of the background there is they started a dirty war in eastern Ukraine. And I guess on Syria, I've done some investigation in terms of the background there is way longer and way dirtier in terms of the actual sort of like Western interests who seem to have, in a similar kind of way where we were involved in overthrowing Mossadegh in Iran in 1953, that there was a major push to try to break up real Arab democratic movements in the region. So that's the deeper background there. But I don't believe that like Israel is the one who actually overthrew Assad. And obviously Russia was not happy about it because that was one of their main, backed assets in the region.
They didn't put up much of a fight though to stop it also. So
true.
But anyway,
last thing I say is I would focus. I think we should dig into the targets that Israel grabbed the interim period when the Assad government was going down and look at what targets were actually destroyed by Israel. Because what we'll talk about in the future is that it came out from Syrian archives actually that Mahmoud Abbas, who, by the way, Trump acknowledges he really likes Mahmoud Abbas more than Netanyahu in certain ways. But it came out from Syrian archives that Mahmoud Abbas was a long-term KGB agent. Okay,
so what archives did you say? Syrian archives?
Yes. Yeah. So once more, see, this is one of the main things that Putin is guarding, some of these really deep Cold War era archives that would disclose exactly how high level their penetrations, not only in the United States and not only in Israel, but also in the Arab world, and how they maintained this operation in order to further the Israel-Palestine conflict and then hang it around the American neck like an albatross. And that's what you see. We can go back to the Operation Susanna operation in 1954, the Levant affair, like I pointed out before, that actually then did split. It split Egypt and Israel, but also split Egypt off from the United States of America at a key early point in the Cold War. So Soviet Israel is a very crucial analysis that we have barely begun to scratch the surface of, I think.
Well, we'll have to have you back on to get updated with the latest developments, and it was good to talk to you. Tell people where they can find you, Jeremy, for your podcast and your Twitter.
You can find us at The Antidote. Just search that. That's ANTEDOTE. We have a Patreon page. You can find our podcasts on all your podcast feeds. And I'm at Jeremy WRK on Twitter. I still call it Twitter. And then I have an authory page that you can find on my Twitter page that has a bunch of other work there.
All right. Well, I thought it was a great show. Perfect timing to have you on. Glad we were finally able to do it. Let us know what you guys think in the comments. Appreciate everybody for the big donos tonight, especially Zorn Der Edom and Iron Pilled and Boleslaw and Aaron Schwartz and that Curious Canuck up there as well. Appreciate you all. Everybody have a nice weekend. I'll be back on Sunday night or Monday. And thank you, Jeremy, for all the time. Almost 3 hours. Huge show. So much to cover. Worked out perfectly. And I'll be in touch. We'll have to do another one soon.
All right. Thank you so much, Adam, for having me on. It was
Cool.
a great conversation. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Awesome.